Chapter 7:14. The news that the Dong family had a precious treasure had spread like wildfire. However, they had found nothing, which was unacceptable to the people present. What happened to the promised 7 limits? Where were the heaven-devouring insects? Where were they? Chu Xiu said with a gloomy face, "What the hell is going on? Could it be that the Dong family hid the treasure somewhere else?" The people present looked at each other and shook their heads. For such a precious treasure, everyone wanted to keep it close to their bodies. How could they hide it somewhere else? Chu Xiu looked at the warriors of the Dong family and said coldly, "I don't believe that the whole Dong family doesn't know where the treasure is. Drag out the warriors of the Dong family and kill them one by one. I don't believe that we can't find a result." The hearts of everyone present went cold. Isn't Chu Xiu a little too murderous? What if these Dong clan disciples really don't know where the treasure is? Then wouldn't they have died for nothing? Although most of the people present were greedy and coveted the precious treasures of the Dong family, they still had a bit of conscience. Therefore, someone immediately advised, "Official Chu, we have already interrogated them. Some people even used a secret method to detect them. They really didn't lie. It's useless for you to kill them." In fact, these people were not so resolute. If Chu Xiu insisted on killing the Dong family's disciples, although they couldn't bear to do so, they weren't saints who would risk their lives to stop him. However, Chu Xiu didn't insist on killing them. He just snorted coldly and said, "Bad luck. I spent so much effort, but in the end I didn't get anything. How unlucky." After saying that, Chu Xiu left with a gloomy face. Situ Qing also turned around and left with a gloomy face. The only difference was that Chu Xiu's face became very calm the moment he turned around, while Situ Qing was very angry. He had lost a large number of goo insects in order to get the heaven-devouring insects. Even the King Kong silkworm he had carefully cultivated was seriously injured, but he still got nothing. The other people present were also a little angry. However, after seeing the gloomy faces of Chu Xiu and Situ Qing, they seemed to be comforted. The 2 people who had contributed the most had nothing in the end. They didn't seem to have done much, so it didn't matter even if they didn't get anything. Therefore, except for some people who still persistently dug 3 feet into the ground, the rest of the people left on the spot. The next day, the news of the Dong family's destruction spread all over the world. Strictly speaking, the Dong family hadn't been destroyed. Only their patriarch and patriarch had died, and the entire Dong family had been plundered. But without a martial arts grandmaster and without a family, the Dong family was no different from being destroyed. The Dong family had offended quite a few people in West Chu over the years, and now that the Dong family had declined to this point, how could they resist their enemies? It should be said that there was no way to block it at all. Other than stubbornly resisting, they would completely fall apart. Perhaps after a period of time, there would be no one in the entire West Chu that could claim to be from the Hailing Dong family. At this moment, in the Heaven Alliance, Qinqing Di was sitting on an exaggeratedly huge bronze chair. He held a cup in his hand, but it was filled with wine instead of tea. Black Tiger was lying lazily at his feet, looking listless and empty. Qinqing Di drank a mouthful of wine and rubbed his chin as he said, "So you're saying that the recent disturbances in the West Chu Jianghu were all caused by that brat Chu Xiu? You destroyed the Dong clan with a rumor?" Xie Xiaolu, who was sitting below, nodded. "Strictly speaking, that seems to be the case. Regarding this matter, Xie Xiaolu could hide it from others, but he could not hide it from Qinqing Di. Even Chu Xiu did not let him hide it. It was impossible to use the power of the Heaven Alliance without letting Qinqing Di know." However, when he heard the news of the Dong clan being destroyed, Xie Xiaolu was dumbfounded. This was because he was the one who had helped Chu Xiu with this matter. He was also the one who had spread the rumor. He had never thought that a small rumor would have such great power. It had actually forced one of the 9 great clans, the Highland Dong clan, to commit suicide. In other words, it was not Chu Xiu or Situ Qing who killed the Dong clan. It was the greed hidden in human nature. The Dong clan thought that they would be safe after joining the Righteous Alliance. They did not know that after the news spread, if the Righteous Alliance did not care about their reputation, they would have been the first to snatch the Dong clan. Qinqing Di rubbed his chin. "Interesting, Chu Xiu is interesting." Regarding this matter, Emperor Qinqing Di actually didn't have much of an opinion. With his cultivation realm, he was just watching a show. At most, he was just a little surprised. In Qinqing Di's eyes, the Dong clan, one of the 9 great families, was not even worth a fart. If he wanted to destroy them, he could directly bring the experts of the Heaven Alliance to their door. Destroying them was only a matter of time. However, the problem was that if he directly went to destroy the Dong clan, many sects would definitely jump out to meddle. Moreover, those who were qualified to meddle in his business were definitely experts, so it would be very troublesome. Moreover, Chu Xiu had taken a different approach and used some small tricks to destroy the Dong clan without causing any trouble. In Emperor Qin Shengdi's eyes, this was also very interesting. Putting down his cup, Qin Shengdi lightly snorted and said, "You juniors, only a few of you are capable. Let's not talk about people like Zhang Qingzhen and Zhong Xian. You guys have a good relationship with each other. That kid Mo Tianlin's temper is too soft, and you are too stupid." Xie Xiaolu raised his head to express his dissatisfaction, but seeing Qin Shengdi's glare, he immediately shrunk his head. Lu Fengxian, that kid is really not bad, but he's a bit too naive. But as a person, it's fine to be a bit naive. Moreover, that kid's luck is good. As long as he doesn't die, his future achievements will be limitless. Hearing this, Xie Xiaolu wanted to refute. Why was Lu Fengxian naive, but he was stupid? However, after following his master for so many years, Xie Xiaolu had learned a principle. His master's words were always right, so it was best not to refute. That's right, that little girl Luo Feiheng is also not bad. Speaking of which, don't look down on that little girl right now. In the future, she might even be stronger than all of you. Among all of you, you are my disciple. Mo Tianlin has the Mo clan behind him. Lu Fengxian, that kid doesn't have any power, and even Chu Xiu, although he was born in the wilderness, actually has the Yinma clan behind him. Only that little girl Luo Feiheng, who previously had the Luo clan as her backing, is now fighting on her own in the Jianghu. This is what it means to start from nothing. If you were to be thrown into the Jianghu like this, you wouldn't even be as good as a little girl. If Chu Xiu was here, he would definitely be amazed at Qin Shengdi's foresight. This person looked rough, but in reality his mind was extremely meticulous. In just a few words he was able to point out everyone's shortcomings and strengths. Mo Qinlin's character was weak. Although his talent was not bad, if he wasn't born in the Mo clan, he would probably be very miserable in the Jianghu. As for Xie Xiaolu, he wasn't really stupid. If an existence ranked in the top 10 of the Dragon and Tiger leaderboard could be said to be stupid, then there wouldn't be many smart people in the younger generation. His true flaw was that he was too straightforward and didn't know how to be flexible. As long as he was properly nurtured, he would become an outstanding successor of the World Alliance. Unfortunately, he didn't have Qin Shengdi's aggressiveness, nor would he have Qin Shengdi's strength. Lu Fengxian's character was even more obvious. Treating people with sincerity and naivety was his strength, but also his weakness. Without this, he wouldn't have become friends with Chu Xiu and the others, and Chu Xiu and the others wouldn't have made friends with him. But at the same time, he wouldn't have encountered so many troubles. So whether it was a blessing or a curse, no one could be sure. Qin Shengdi's most accurate judgment was still Luo Feiheng. Only Chu Xiu knew that the future Luo Feiheng's achievements would far surpass their imagination. Then what about Brother Chu? Xie Xiaolu suddenly asked. Qin Shengdi paused, then said, "To be honest, I can't see through that brat. Most of the time I thought that he had already reached his limit, but I didn't expect that he could still give people some surprises. But this brat has a lot of tricks up his sleeves. When it comes to playing tricks, you guys can't compare to that brat." Qin Shengdi stood up, looked outside and lightly said, "Of course, the scariest thing about that brat is that while he is playing tricks, he didn't give up on his martial arts training. He can distinguish his priorities, which is very rare." With that, Qin Shengdi looked at Xie Xiaolu and coldly snorted, "He is so much better than you, and he still knows how to run around in Jianghu, calculating his own benefits. But what about you? You still have the mood to chat here, hurry up and go train." Xie Xiaolu finally couldn't bear it anymore. With a wronged expression he said, "Master, didn't you tell me to talk about Brother Chu?" Qin Shengdi glared, "You still dare to talk back." As he spoke, he directly slapped Xie Xiaolu away, telling him to scram back to his room to cultivate. On the side, He who licked his furry paws and yawned out of boredom. This pair of master and disciple's daily routine was one beating people, the other being beaten. It was nothing strange. After beating and beating they would get used to it. Maybe they could even practice a golden shield or something. Chu Xiu didn't plan to care about the disturbance in West Chu. He directly took Yuanji back to northern Yen. After Yuanji saw Chu Xiu's methods, he directly put away any thoughts that he shouldn't have. Even if he could divine everything, he couldn't divine the human heart. Chu Xiu's methods were a bit too terrifying. With just a few rumors, he completely destroyed the Dong family. The scariest thing was that the Dong family didn't even know how they died, which was a bit scary. Of course, Chu Xiu didn't tell him that the Dong family's ancestors should know, but unfortunately he could only complain to Yama. In any case, Yuanji was scared and completely gave up on those little thoughts. If he joined the devil path, then so be it. In any case, he wasn't a good person before. Although he was a fortune teller, he also did a lot of things to cheat people. Chapter 7:15. In the eyes of ordinary people, divination masters should be cold and aloof. Only when you offered up your offerings would they pinch their fingers together and solemnly point at you, saying that you have an ominous barrier around you. You will definitely face a bloody calamity in the near future. Master Yuanji looked like this when he read people's fortunes in the past. But now that he was Chu Xiu's subordinate, he returned to his original appearance, which was very vulgar. This was Mei Qinglian's first impression of Master Yuanji, so she looked at Chu Xiu in surprise. Did he mean to say that he went to West Chu and stirred up a bloody storm, but in the end he brought back this thing? Chu Xiu shrugged his shoulders and said, "Don't judge a book by its cover. This Master Yuanji has real skills." Chu Xiu wasn't trying to flatter Yuanji. Although the old Taoist was a bit wretched, the fact that he was received by the Celestial Master Manor after going to West Chu was not only because of Zhang Chuanzong's face, but also because the old Taoist had high attainments in the way of divination. After a few greetings, Chu Xiu brought Master Yuanji into the secret room. He gave the Divine Sacrifice Jade to Master Yuanji and told him to use the Divine Sacrifice Jade to perform the 3 lives reflecting technique. Chu Xiu wanted to do this when he was in West Chu, but he wasn't in his own territory at that time. Chu Xiu was afraid of an accident, so he endured it and waited until he returned to Northern Yen to have Master Yuanji perform the divination. Master Yuanji sighed as he held the Divine Shedding Jade in his hand. His branch had wanted this for a long time, but his branch only produced fortune tellers and didn't produce any experts. Of course he didn't dare go to the Dong family to steal it. However, Master Yuanji didn't dare waste too much time. He placed the Divine Sacrifice Jade in his hand and formed a seal. Instantly, a mysterious aura was released from the Divine Sacrifice Jade. Grandmaster Yuanji said in a deep voice, "Sir Chu, when the 3 lives reflecting shadows technique takes effect, if you are really possessing or reincarnating a body, and your soul and body are not the same, you will see 2 people existing at the same time." Chu Xiu nodded. Following Master Yuanji's actions, his mental strength seeped into Chu Xiu's body. Without Chu Xiu resisting, Chu Xiu's mental strength gradually seeped into a grayish-white world. In this grayish-white world, Chu Xiu did not see the 2 of them. Instead, he saw the appearance of his previous incarnation, Lin Yi. This made Chu Xiu frown. According to Master Yuanji, if it was confirmed that he had taken over someone else's body or reincarnated, there should be 2 figures appearing now. One was the appearance of Chu Xiu in his previous life, and the other was the appearance of the current Chu Xiu. However, there was only one right now. Why did it have to be in the past? Before Chu Xiu could think further, the figure suddenly changed. It changed from the appearance of Lin Yi in his previous life to the appearance of Chu Xiu. The 2 faces flickered continuously, but in the end, the originally misty scene suddenly began to change. The surroundings actually turned into a blood-red appearance, and this part of the world had shockingly turned into the netherworld Blood Sea. Chu Xiu's consciousness floated in the Blood Sea. His constantly changing body stood in the Blood Sea. All of a sudden, he raised his head and looked at Chu Xiu as if he had a mind of his own. There was an unfathomable smile on his face. At the same time, the 2 faces started to blur, and a 3rd face appeared on the body. It was a face that Chu Xiu had never seen before. He could not tell its age, but it seemed very young. However, there was an endless vicissitudes of life in its eyes. His facial features were clear, but Chu Xiu could not describe what he looked like. He could not even remember what he looked like, even though this face was right in front of him. This was a very strange feeling. It was a very uncomfortable feeling, and it made Chu Xiu go crazy from the awkwardness. His figure took a step in the boundless Blood Sea. In an instant, the Blood Sea churned and countless skeletons and malicious spirits howled and tore at each other. In an instant, Chu Xiu felt as if he had fallen into the yellow springs of hell. The face looked at Chu Xiu and said in an indescribable tone, "You're finally here. I've been waiting for you for a long time." These words, which sounded like a lover's conversation, made Chu Xiu's hair stand on end. This was because the voice was exactly the same as his. With a loud bang, everything in front of him shattered. A cracking sound was heard, and the Divine Sacrifice Jade in Master Yuanji's hand had shattered. Master Yuanji looked at the shattered Divine Sacrifice Jade in his hand and then at Chu Xiu, whose face was pale and covered in cold sweat. He looked as if he had just been fished out of a water tank. Master Yuanji was stunned. What was going on? Although this was the first time he had used the 3 lives illuminating technique, The ancient books passed down by his ancestors had recorded the situation of using this secret technique. It was a very gentle secret technique, and there should not be any side effects. Moreover, although the 3 lives illuminating technique consumed a lot of energy, the divine sacrifice jade should be able to withstand it. How could the divine sacrifice jade have shattered? Chu Xiu took a deep breath and wiped the cold sweat off his head. He closed his eyes and tried to recall carefully, but he could not remember the person's face. Master Yuanji asked carefully, "Official Chu, are you all right?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I'm fine." Suddenly, Chu Xiu looked at Master Yuanji and said coldly, "Don't tell anyone about what happened today." When Chu Xiu glanced at him, Grandmaster Yuanji's heart trembled. He did not know if it was an illusion, but when Chu Xiu looked at him just now, he felt that Chu Xiu's eyes were blood red, as if they contained an endless sea of blood. It was extremely ferocious and terrifying. Under normal circumstances, although Chu Xiu was ferocious, that was only in character. However, that gaze just now made Master Yuanji feel as if he was in hell, and his soul was about to be sucked out. However, when he looked again, Chu Xiu's gaze had returned to normal. It was just a normal threatening gaze. Master Yuanji's heart trembled again and he hurriedly nodded and said, "Official Chu, don't worry. I'm blind and deaf today. I didn't see or hear anything." Chu Xiu nodded and waved his hand to let Master Yuanji leave. Everything he saw in the divine shedding jade's illusion made Chu Xiu understand more about himself. Although it was more confusing, he at least had a vague guess. But what did that person mean when he said, "You're finally here"? Was he waiting for me? Where was he waiting for me? In the blood sea of the Styx River? What was he waiting for me for? The series of questions made Chu Xiu's mind feel like it was about to explode. He shook his head and decided to stop thinking about it for the time being. After calming himself down, Chu Xiu walked out of the secret chamber. When Mei Qinglian saw Chu Xiu coming out with a head full of sweat, she said with a strange expression, "What were you doing in there with that guy? Why are you sweating all over?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "Don't mess around. Let me ask you something. Do you have a portrait of Dugu Weiwei?" Mei Qinglian stared blankly for a moment before saying, "A portrait of sect leader Dugu? No." Chu Xiu frowned and said, "In the past, Yurine demon sect was an orthodox demonic sect, and one of the major demonic sects under the Kunlun devil cult. How come you can't even find a portrait of Dugu Weiwei?" Mei Qinglian rolled her eyes and said, "You ask me, who should I ask? I'm not someone from that era. However, it's useless even if you look for that brat Lu Jin. In the entire Kunlun demon sect, or rather the entire pugilistic world, you won't be able to find a portrait of cult leader Dugu." "What?" Mei Qinglian said, "Who knows? Anyway, there isn't one. Right, why are you looking for a portrait of Patriarch Dugu?" Chu Xiu waved his hand and said, "I just want to admire the demeanor of Patriarch Dugu in the past. Forget it if you don't have it." After that, Chu Xiu waved and left, leaving Mei Qinglian frowning and looking at Chu Xiu with a hint of doubt. She could see that Chu Xiu had something in his heart, but since Chu Xiu didn't intend to say it, she didn't ask. "Right, there are some things that have accumulated in Jinwu Hall during this time. I need you to deal with them." As she said this, Mei Qinglian directly threw a few pieces of news to Chu Xiu. Jinwu Hall had just opened. In fact, there was no big deal. Generally, the people below would deal with it themselves, and they wouldn't even report it to Mei Qinglian. However, once it was reported, it was basically something that they couldn't make a decision on. Chu Xiu looked through a few pieces of news and suddenly said in a soft voice, "The old ancestor of the northern floating snow city is going to celebrate his 400th birthday? Tiske, this old ancestor is not dead yet? It's really not easy. The northern floating snow city sent an invitation for us to go over?" The news that there was a true fire spirit refinement realm old ancestor in the northern floating snow city was known throughout the underworld, and every 10 years he would celebrate his birthday. Although in theory the true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse could live to 400 years old, this was only in theory. It was not easy to really live to 400 years old. However, the old ancestor of the northern floating snow city had not made a move for nearly 100 years. It was even said that he never showed up in the northern floating snow city. Only on his birthday, on this joyous day, would he choose a young disciple to teach personally, and he would call him into the secret room to teach alone. It was difficult for others to see him. It was not uncommon to rely on closed-door training to reduce the number of moves, or even directly seal most of one's power to delay aging. For this kind of behavior, Chu Xiu was very disdainful. It was a shame for a martial artist to die of old age in bed. Regardless of whether he was a martial Dao master or a true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist, He was also an influential figure in the underworld when he was at his peak. But now he lived like a tortoise. Even if he lived a few decades or 100 years longer than others, what was the point? Mei Qinglian sneered at the side and said, "What are you thinking? With your current reputation, do you think the northern floating snow city will invite you to participate in the birthday? That's really not auspicious. It's a message from the Northern Yen Emperor. He hopes that you can make a trip there and reach an agreement with the northern floating snow city, allowing the Northern Yen army to station in the northern land." Hearing this, Chu Xiu suddenly frowned. What the hell was Xianglong doing? Why did they have to station their troops in the northernmost wilderness? Chapter 7:16. Chu Xiu disagreed with Xianglong's intention to station troops in the wilderness of the far north. In his opinion, Xianglong was obviously arrogant. Seeing that nothing had happened to the martial suppression hall after stirring up a bloody storm in the northwest Jianghu, he thought that he could really suppress the entire northern Yen Jianghu. In fact, the reason why Chu Xiu could do this was not because of his ability, but because of the moon-worshipping cult. It was because of the rise of the moon-worshipping cult that the attention of Chu Xiu's biggest obstacle, the Great Light Temple, was attracted. And because of the absence of the monks from the Great Light Temple, Chu Xiu could do whatever he wanted in the northern Yen. Otherwise, unless Wei Shuya and the others took action, no one could go against those bald donkeys. Now, who was Xianglong preparing to station troops in the northern Yen? Who was he provoking? A place like the wilderness of the far north had no value at all. Although it was vast, it was sparsely populated. There were only a few sects like the floating snow city in the far north. There were also some local aboriginal tribes that could only rely on hunting for a living. There was no threat at all. Other than that, the wilderness of the far north only had the evil sect and the Great Light Temple. The evil sect was nothing to worry about. Was Xianglong challenging the Great Light Temple? Mei Qinglian said, "Are you going to go?" Chu Xiu stood up and said, "Since it is His Majesty's order, then I will go. As for whether the negotiation can be successful, it depends on the floating snow city in the far north." As long as Xianglong did not want Chu Xiu to do something like courting death by going against the Great Light Temple, Chu Xiu could satisfy him. Moreover, Chu Xiu had a lot of grievances with the floating snow city in the far north. If there was a chance, even if he could not destroy the floating snow city in the far north, Chu Xiu planned to find a chance to annoy them. Chu Xiu had always been narrow-minded. Ever since Chu Xiu stepped into Jianghu, it was not that he had never suffered losses. However, most of the times he suffered losses were due to his own strength. If he was not as strong as others, then there was nothing much to say. However, the last time he joined forces with the drifting snow city in the extreme north to deal with the Morgue village, they were tricked by Han Tian, a thick-browed, big-eyed, and boorish fellow. Both he and Ye Renlong suffered heavy injuries and almost took Chu Xiu's life. Later on, when the Northern Yen Devil-Slaying Alliance was established, although the Northern Drifts Now City didn't participate in truth, they did want to participate. However, they were stopped by Pang Hu. If not, there would definitely be people from the Northern Drifts Now City among those who ambushed Chu Xiu. Thinking of Pang Hu, Chu Xiu suddenly had a thought. At present, Pang Hu's position in the Northern Yen martial arts world was actually very awkward. Previously, he was the enemy of the imperial court and the righteous martial arts world. Now, although the hatred between him and the imperial court had been resolved and the 36 northern bandits had become history, it did not mean that the Chilean stockade could continue to walk openly in the northern Yen land. Moreover, with Pang Hu's character, he and the other sects were even more intolerable. Therefore, at this time, if Chu Xiu opened his mouth to recruit him, he believed that Pang Hu would agree. After all, he owed Chu Xiu a favor. Of course, Chu Xiu's so-called recruitment was not to let Pang Hu become his subordinate. With the current strength and qualifications of Chu Xiu, if he opened his mouth to recruit him, even if Pang Hu owed him a favor, he would still be asking to be humiliated. Therefore he recruited Pang Hu only for cooperation. If Pang Hu also joined the Jinwu Hall, Pang Hu could obtain the status of a Jinwu Hall member and be considered as a member of the Northern Yen Imperial Court. Meanwhile, Chu Xiu could also gain an ally in the Northern Yen land. With this thought in mind, Chu Xiu was not in a hurry to go to the northern floating snow city. Instead, he first brought Mei Qinglian to look for Pang Hu. During this period of time, the Chilean stockade had not changed much from the last time. It was just that some of the branch stockades had been completely abolished, leaving only the main stockade in the dense forest of Liaodong to recuperate. Seeing that Chu Xiu had arrived, the people of the Chilean stockade immediately welcomed Chu Xiu in. After all, they had fought side by side. The Chilean stockade was very familiar with Chu Xiu and had a good impression of him. Pang Hu laughed as he walked out and said, "Young Master Lin? No, I should call you Brother Chu. During this period of time, your actions in the Northern Yen have been very impressive. Even I am envious of you." Originally, Pang Hu had a very forthright appearance when he walked out. However, after seeing Mei Qinglian, Pang Hu became bashful. He foolishly laughed twice, scratched his head and said, "Qing? Saintess Mei, why are you here?" Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said, "Why? Can't I come to your Chilean stockade? It's not that I want to criticize you, but why are you getting worse and worse? In the past, when the Northern 36 bandits were still around, you were considered a local tyrant. In the end, you were forced into such a state by the Jui manor." Pang Hu was slightly unconvinced. In the past, when the Northern 36 bandits were still around, they had joined forces. Now he was the only one left. It was not easy for him to achieve this. However, when facing Mei Qinglian, Pang Hu seemed to be a head shorter. He only held back his red face and did not refute. Intuition told Chu Xiu that these two people must have had a past. However, Chu Xiu did not ask much. He just went straight to the point and said, "This time I came to find Leader Pang to ask you a question. Now that you know that I have joined forces with the Northern Yen Emperor Xianglong to establish the Jinwu Hall, I would like to ask Leader Pang if you are willing to join my Jinwu Hall. After joining the Jinwu Hall, Leader Pang will only have the identity of the Jinwu Hall in name. It can be considered as wearing the skin of the imperial court, so it will be more convenient for you to do things. You and I are acquaintances, so I will not waste too much effort. In the future, if the Jinwu Hall needs Leader Pang's help, then we will discuss it. There is no subordinate relationship." When it came to business, Pang Hu did not have the bashful attitude from before. He only frowned and said, "Brother Chu, you helped me a lot last time. Saintess Mei was also there. If it was just me, I would have agreed to it. But now it involves the entire Chilean stockade. Even though I am the chief of the stockade, I do not want to decide the future of my brothers. So, Brother Chu, please forgive me. I need to discuss with them before making a decision." Chu Xiu nodded. Pang Hu's decision was very normal. As a leader, if Pang Hu made a decision for his subordinates so easily, then it would be called reckless and irresponsible. After being the leader for so many years, Pang Hu might seem rough, but he was not really a brainless person. After waiting for Pang Hu to leave, Mei Qinglian said, "Do you think that guy will agree? I know that the relationship between the 36 bandits of the Northern Land was very good in the past. It can even be said that the 36 bandits of the Northern Land were destroyed in the hands of the Northern Yen Imperial Court. In the end, you are letting him join the Jinwu Hall. Although it is only wearing the skin of the Imperial Court, it is still very difficult for the Chilean village to accept." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "On the contrary, I feel that they will accept it very easily. The 36 bandits of the Northern Land are already dead, but the Chilean village still exists. Joining the Jinwu Hall is not bad for them. It is not worth it to block the path of the living for a bunch of dead people." Sure enough, less than a quarter of an hour later, Pang Hu had already returned. He gave Chu Xiu a reply that the Chilean village was willing to join the Jinwu Hall. Although there was indeed a small number of people who were not willing to join the Jinwu Hall, they were not even willing to become the imperial court's dogs on the surface, but most of them did not object. Most of the warriors in the Chilean village were martial artists in their prime. Due to the current situation of the Chilean village, they could only endure in this dense forest of Liaodong. 1 or 2 years was fine, but any longer and they would really not be able to endure. "Leader Pang, you have made a very wise choice." Chu Xiu smiled and said, "By the way, do you have time now, Leader Pang? Saintess Mei and I are going to the northern fluttering snow city." Pang Hu said in surprise, "Why are you going there? Are you going to make a move on the northern fluttering snow city?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "If we are really going to make a move, it will not be just the two of us. Xianglong gave us a mission to go to the northern fluttering snow city. It is just in time for the birthday of the old ancestor of the fluttering snow city. Leader Pang, if you want to go, just take it as joining in the fun. I am afraid there will not be a fight this time." Pang Hu nodded and said, "Oh, so the old turtle of the Bai family is celebrating his birthday again. All right, I happen to have nothing to do, so I will go with you." Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, "Old turtle? The old ancestor of the northern fluttering snow city has a bad reputation in the northern Yen martial world?" Although Chu Xiu was also considered a northern Yen person, he actually did not stay in the northern Yen for a long time. Pang Hu was a real Jianghu hero from the northern Yen land. He actually knew some of the secrets of the northern Yen Jianghu better than Chu Xiu. Pang Hu sneered and said, "That old turtle was not a good person when he was young. When he was the city lord of the Fluttering Snow City, it was when the Fluttering Snow City was at its weakest. Even in the entire Fluttering Snow City, he was the only martial arts master. Therefore, he fawned on the Great Light Temple and even worshipped a Buddha statue in his own ancestral hall. Relying on his endurance and the protection of the Great Light Temple, this old turtle also stepped into the true fire spirit refinement realm. The Fluttering Snow City also produced a few martial arts masters, but he swept away his previous humble attitude. While alienating the Great Light Temple, he eliminated dissidents in the northern land and suppressed other forces. Now you can see that in the northern wilderness, there are only 3 forces left. Other than the Great Light Temple and the evil pole sect, there is also the Fluttering Snow City in the northern wilderness. That bunch of monks from the Great Light Temple really wouldn't do something like killing the innocent, and the extreme evil sect also kept a very low profile during that period of time. The number of people killed by the extreme north's Floating Snow City in the extreme north was even more than the extreme evil sect. After listening to Pang Hu's words, Chu Xiu felt that the old ancestor of the Fluttering Snow City who was afraid of death was not so bad after all. Instead, he had the potential to be an ambitious person. When he was weak, he kept a low profile and endured. When he was strong, he would use ruthless and decisive means to suppress dissidents. There was nothing wrong with this. If it were Chu Xiu, he would do the same. It was just that the other party's means of struggling to survive was something that Chu Xiu could not agree with. Chapter 717. The birthday celebration of the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City was considered a major event in the Northern Yen pugilist world, but it wasn't considered a major event. It was considered a major event because of the identity of the Northern Drifts Now City. Not to mention the Northern Wilderness, even in the entire Northern Yen pugilist world, the Northern Drifts Now City was considered a first-class major force. And it wasn't considered a major event because the birthday celebration of the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City was a little too frequent. A martial Dao Grandmaster had a lifespan of 300 years, and a true fire spirit refinement realm expert had a lifespan of 400 years. Although this was only in theory, most of them could live up to 200 or 300 years. With such a long lifespan, how could it be possible for them to celebrate their birthday so frequently? Therefore, they would only invite their friends to celebrate their 100th, 200th, or 188th birthday. But the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City was different. Not long after he started his secluded cultivation, he began to celebrate his birthday every 10 years, causing some of the major forces in the northern wilderness to suffer greatly. Since it was a birthday celebration, they had to send some gifts no matter what. If they didn't bring enough gifts, not only would they be embarrassed, they were also afraid that the Northern Drifts Now City would bear a grudge against them. So in the beginning they tried every possible means to find gifts for the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City, but later on, they discovered that they couldn't afford to send any gifts, so they could only reduce the value of the gifts. Moreover, the Northern Drifts Now City didn't say anything about it. Only then did everyone feel relieved and began to participate in the birthday celebration. And they also discovered that the birthday celebration of the old ancestor of the Northern Drifts Now City didn't seem to be for the sake of making money, but just to show off the status of the Northern Drifts Now City. So for the Northern Drifts Now City's actions, although the other sects were puzzled, no one dared to say anything. After all, the strength and status of the Northern Drifts Now City was clearly displayed as long as they were happy. When Chu Xiu's group arrived outside the Northern Drifts Now City, the originally deserted Northern Drifts Now City was now incomparably lively, with many cultivators coming and going. Mei Qinglian and Pang Hu might not be acquainted with each other, but in the entire Northern Yen region, there weren't many who didn't know who Chu Xiu was. Seeing Chu Xiu's group of 3 arrive, everyone present, whether it was from the far north's drifting Snow City or the other cultivators who came to attend the birthday celebration, all revealed strange expressions. The Drifts Now City of the extreme north had a grudge with Chu Xiu. This was something many people knew. But now Chu Xiu actually appeared here openly. No matter how one looked at it, it was clear that he came with ill intentions. Moreover, Chu Xiu's notoriety in the Northern Yen Kingdom was very great. He often chose to kill people on their joyous days, as if he wanted them to experience the emotions of great joy and great sorrow. He was extremely ruthless. Now he also chose such a day to come to the Drifts Now City of the extreme north. Could it be that he also had some opinions about the Drifts Now City of the extreme north? However, although everyone didn't have a good impression of Chu Xiu, but with Chu Xiu's status and the status of the Zhenwu Hall, there were many patriarchs and sect masters of small forces who greeted Chu Xiu politely. At this time, The Drifts Now city of the extreme north also received the news that Chu Xiu would come in person on such a day. Of course, they couldn't drive Chu Xiu out, so they had to come to welcome him, and they also sent people of high status. Official Chu, how come you have time to come to my Drifts Now city of the extreme north? I hope you don't take offense for not going out to welcome you. A middle-aged man in his 40s with a slender figure walked out, with a fake smile on his face, and made an inviting gesture to Chu Xiu. Regarding the information of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, Chu Xiu had also learned about it. This person was also a direct descendant of the Bai family of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, Bai Hanfeng. He also had the strength of a martial arts master. The martial arts masters of the older generation of the Bai family were almost all dead. They were all people of the same generation as the old ancestor of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, and some were even his juniors. In the end, they didn't survive the old ancestor and died first. And this generation of the Bai family was obviously not as talented as the previous generation. There were only a few who were qualified to step into the realm of martial arts master. Bai Hantian was the first to step into the realm of martial arts master and became the city lord. Bai Hanfeng didn't appear in the Jianghu after stepping into the realm of martial arts master, but he had been serving the old ancestor of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north. Chu Xiu smiled and said, I heard that the birthday of the Bai family's old ancestor of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north is such a joyous day. Even if the Drifts Now city of the extreme north didn't invite me, I still have to come. Bai Hanfeng's mouth twitched and he coughed and said, Official Chu, you misunderstood. Everyone knows that Official Chu, you established the Zhenwu Hall and are very busy every day. Our Bai family is a little sorry to trouble you for such a small matter, so we didn't invite you. Chu Xiu waved his hand and said with a smile, It doesn't matter. Even if you didn't invite me, I still came. By the way, bring the congratulatory gift. Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu with a look that said, Are you kidding me? What congratulatory gift did they prepare? Chu Xiu patted his head and said, I forgot, the congratulatory gift is here with me. As he spoke, Chu Xiu took out a bottle of medicinal pills and threw it to Bai Hanfeng. He said, The Zhenwu Hall's secret medicinal pill, the Green Dragon Emu Wood Heaven Returning Life Transformation Pill. The Bai family's old ancestor is so old, it's inevitable that there will be some bumps and bruises. My gift of medicinal pills is sincere, right? Bai Hanfeng's face suddenly turned black. There were people who gave gifts of medicinal pills, but they all gave medicinal pills for cultivation. What was the meaning of giving a healing pill? Moreover, how was this medicinal pill the Green Dragon Emu Wood Heaven Returning Life Transformation Pill? It was clearly a third revolution medicinal pill, the blood recovery pill. There were 3 big words written on the bottle. Did you think I was blind? Bai Hanfeng was so angry that he trembled. However, on such a day he couldn't fall out with Chu Xiu. So he could only say with a black face, Official Chu, please come in. Chu Xiu laughed twice, but he didn't continue to provoke him. Instead, he led his people into the city. The exterior of the northern floating snow city seemed to be paved with ice bricks, but the interior was extremely luxurious. All the buildings were carved beams and painted pillars, and the decorations were gilded. It was comparable to the imperial palace. The northern floating snow city had flourished for thousands of years in the north. Naturally, it had its own heritage. Before the northern Yan city, the northern floating snow city stood tall in the northern wilderness. After so many generations of development, it was normal that it was more luxurious than the imperial palace. Chu Xiu and the others were strolling around, while Bai Hanfeng had already gone to find Bai Hantian with a black face. City Lord, Chu Xiu came with ill intentions. He is clearly here to provoke us. Bai Hantian said indifferently, It's true that he is here to provoke us. But don't worry, he won't make a move here. If he really wanted to make a move on the northern floating snow city, he wouldn't have brought so few people with him. Our northern floating snow city is not the giant spirit gang. No matter how bold Chu Xiu is, he wouldn't be this bold. Go and greet the guests first. I'll go meet him and see what he's up to. As he spoke, Bai Hantian walked out and headed straight for Chu Xiu. When the martial artists along the way saw Bai Hantian's aggressive appearance, they subconsciously made way for him, as if they were watching a show. Walking in front of Chu Xiu, Bai Hantian looked around and said in a deep voice, Official Chu, let's talk in private. You don't want to be treated like a monkey in public, right? Chu Xiu nodded and said, City Lord Bai, please lead the way. Bai Hantian didn't say anything. He brought Chu Xiu to a reception room and closed the door. He said coldly, Chu Xiu, what are you trying to do by coming to my northern floating snow city? Don't treat my northern floating snow city like the giant spirit gang. This is not a place where you can behave atrociously. My northern floating snow city doesn't care about what you've done in the northern yen. But the condition is that you don't provoke my northern floating snow city. Chu Xiu said indifferently, City Lord Bai, don't be so agitated. No matter what, you and I are people who have fought side by side, aren't we? Bai Han Tian snorted coldly. He knew that Chu Xiu was referring to the battle with the morgue. He had gone back on his word and schemed against Chu Xiu and Ye Renlong to kill each other. However, Bai Han Tian didn't think that he had done anything wrong. If it weren't for Chu Xiu's luck, Ye Renlong and Chu Xiu would have perished together. Sitting opposite Bai Han Tian, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, I won't keep you in suspense, City Lord Bai. I'm not here to cause trouble for your northern floating snow city. I'm here on His Imperial Majesty's orders to discuss something with you. Hearing that this matter involved the Northern Yen Imperial Court, Bai Han Tian couldn't help but frown. What is it? It's very simple. His Imperial Majesty is preparing to station troops in the Northern Yen. When the time comes, I hope that City Lord Bai will cooperate. Chu Xiu said slowly. Bai Han Tian immediately stood up and shouted angrily, Impossible! What is the Imperial Court trying to do? Are they trying to suppress my northern floating snow city? In the entire northern wastelands, the Great Light Temple and the Evil Pole sect were located in the deepest part of the northern wastelands. It was a desolate and cold land with a radius of hundreds of miles. Only the northern floating snow city's territory was considered close to the northern Yan's Liaodong County. If the northern Yan were to station troops in the northern wastelands, it would be like putting a layer of shackles on the northern floating snow city. It wouldn't feel good. Seeing Bai Han Tian's expression, Chu Xiu didn't find it strange at all. It would be strange if Bai Han Tian agreed to such a sensitive matter. Chu Xiu simply said, City Lord Bai, you're thinking too much. To put it bluntly, your northern floating snow city isn't weak, but it's not to the point where the Northern Yen Imperial Court would go out of their way to suppress it. The one the Imperial Court wants to suppress is the one behind your northern floating snow city. The Great Light Temple? Bai Han Tian frowned. Yes, the Great Light Temple. However, the Great Light Temple is located in the northern wastelands. The Northern Yen Imperial Court can't bypass your northern floating snow city and station troops there. Therefore, they can only find a place near your northern floating snow city. I advise you to agree to this matter because His Majesty only sent me here to discuss this with you. If you don't agree, forget about the suppression hall. Can you withstand the pressure from the entire Northern Yen Imperial Court? Bai Han Tian's eyes were gloomy as he looked at Chu Xiu and said, Are you threatening me? Chu Xiu said lightly, It's not a threat, it's just a fact. I have an agreement with the Great Light Temple that I won't make a move for the time being. However, the suppression hall belongs to the Imperial Court after all. If His Majesty wants me to make a move, I can't refuse. Therefore, City Lord Bai, I'm not threatening you. I just hope that you won't force me to make a move. Chapter 7:18. Chu Xiu's attitude infuriated Bai Han Tian, but he did not fall out with Chu Xiu on the spot. After all, it was Elder Ancestor Bai's birthday celebration. Chu Xiu could deliberately provoke and stir up trouble here, but he could not ignore it. Chu Xiu stood up and said in a relaxed manner, Governor Bai, let me be honest with you. I don't have to do this, it all depends on the Imperial Court. You know my background. I'm working with the Northern Yen Imperial Court, but I'm not a member of the Northern Yen Imperial Court. I just want a stable place to live. But in the pugilistic world, there's nothing I can do. It's the same in the Imperial Court. If the Imperial Court wants me to do it, I can't disobey. If you agree, everyone can relax. If you don't, even I can't guarantee the consequences. With that, Chu Xiu turned and left, leaving Bai Han Tian alone with an uncertain expression. Outside, Mei Qinglian asked in a low voice, Bai Han Tian rejected you? Chu Xiu nodded and said, Of course he rejected me. It would be strange if he agreed. Anyway, Xiang Long only asked me to negotiate with the drifting snow city. Whether it succeeds or fails in the end, it's not my business. Jinwu Hall is only responsible for killing people. I don't have the leisure to be Xiang Long's negotiator. As for the Northern Yen garrison in the drifting snow city, Chu Xiu was not very enthusiastic. Previously, because Chu Xiu had just arrived in the Northern Yen, Jinwu Hall needed to establish a foothold in the Northern Yen lands and make a name for themselves. That was why he took the initiative to plot against the giant spirit gang, stirring up trouble in the Northern Yen martial arts world, all to establish the prestige and status of Jinwu Hall. But now, Jinwu Hall already had the prestige and status, and this matter was just a whim of Xiang Long's. Why did he have to work so hard? Maybe after he ran into a wall here, Xiang Long wouldn't force him anymore. After half a day, Elder Ancestor Bai's birthday celebration officially began. In fact, the birthday party had been held many times. It was just the martial arts forces present eating, drinking, and communicating with each other. The big forces were fighting and scheming against each other, and the small forces were currying favor with each other. It was very boring. Chu Xiu, Mei Qinglian, and Pang Hu found a spot near the front and began to gorge themselves on the food. Mei Qinglian was a woman, so she could be considered reserved. Chu Xiu was a man of status, so his table manners could be considered refined. Only Pang Hu was truly bold, completely using the same boldness he had when he was in Chilean Stockade Village to eat large pieces of meat and drink large bowls of wine. Of course, although those who disliked Pang Hu didn't say anything, no one dared to say anything. Although everyone knew that the 36 great bandits of the northern land were gone, the Chilean Stockade was not a force to be trifled with. Moreover, Pang Hu seemed to be with Chu Xiu now, which made them even more afraid to say anything. However, the martial artists from the northern fluttering snow city who were serving at the side pointed at Chu Xiu's table hesitantly, stuttering. "My lords, your seats, Pang Hu said unhappily. "What's wrong? Isn't a birthday celebration just about eating and drinking? Can't I eat here? All right, your chickens are not bad, give me 2 more. The disciple did not dare to say anything else, so he ran to the kitchen to get the chickens. After a while, there was a sudden sound from outside, followed by the sound of plates falling to the ground and shattering. Looking back, it was the disciple who went to the kitchen to get the chickens. He was slapped, and the 2 plates of chickens in his hands fell to the ground. A young man in his 30s, dressed in white, pointed at the disciple and scolded, "What are you doing? Don't you know the rules? Don't you know where my seat is? Why did someone else take it?" Looking at his behavior, Pang Hu finally understood why the disciple was stuttering just now. It turned out that they had taken someone else's seat. During the birthday banquet, the seats at the front were all reserved for those with status. The Drifts Now city of the extreme north basically didn't expect Chu Xiu and the others would come. Hence, they naturally wouldn't arrange seats for them. The disciple from before had not been disrespectful at all. Seeing that he had suffered a slap and even caused him to be unable to get the chicken dinner, Pang Hu immediately stood up and said coldly, "Brat, it's me who took your seat. What, are you not satisfied?" Chu Xiu and Mei Qinglian were eating at the side, too lazy to even look. The young man's strength was not bad. He had reached the physical invulnerability stage in his 30s. But it was a pity that he and Chu Xiu were people from 2 different worlds. If he were to deal with such a small character himself, it would be too degrading. It would be better to let Pang Hu handle it. The young man looked at Pang Hu and frowned. "Senior, the seats were arranged by the servants. It's fine if you took them, but I'm teaching them a lesson. What has that got to do with you?" Hearing this, Chu Xiu raised his head slightly. The background of this young man was not ordinary. After Pang Hu stood up, if he were to admit defeat, he would be a good-for-nothing. And if he were to be so brainless as to argue with Pang Hu, he would be a brainless fool. But after seeing Pang Hu's strength, he did not feel the slightest bit of fear. In fact, what he said made sense. It was true that Chu Xiu and the others had taken his seat, but they did not do it in front of him. Hence, he was only teaching a lesson to a servant who did not make proper arrangements. Most importantly, he was teaching a servant from the fluttering snow city of the far north a lesson. Even if you beat a dog, you had to look at its master. To teach a servant from the fluttering snow city of the far north a lesson in their territory, either the other party was very familiar with the fluttering snow city, or the other party was very strong, to the point where he could go head-on against the fluttering snow city. Pang Hu scratched his head and said, "Kid, you're pretty good with words. But I don't know if your master has taught you before, but don't talk so much nonsense when talking to your seniors. If I say that I'm right, then I'm right. If I say that I'm wrong, then I'm wrong." As soon as he finished speaking, the aura around Pang Hu suddenly became incomparably strong, and a wave of pressure enveloped the young man. With Pang Hu's strength in the martial Dao realm, the pressure of this aura was enough to force him to his knees. But at this moment, a figure blocked in front of the young man and snorted coldly, "What kind of ability is it to only dare to show off in front of a junior?" The person blocking in front of Pang Hu was a middle-aged man with a burly figure and a cold expression. With a casual slash of his hand, the saber intent soared into the sky, as if it could split the heavens and the earth. His slash was bold and unparalleled. Even though he did not have a saber in his hand, he still exuded a sharp aura. Pang Hu did not expect such a person to suddenly jump out. In a moment of carelessness he was pushed back by the saber aura. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and took a step forward. In the blink of an eye he was already in front of Pang Hu. He casually stretched out a hand and crushed the saber aura. Although the saber aura had already been expended quite a bit when it was slashing at Pang Hu, it was still shocking enough that Chu Xiu could crush it with a single hand. Pang Hu's face showed a hint of anger. Just as he was about to attack, he was stopped by Chu Xiu. Looking at the middle-aged man, Chu Xiu said lightly, "What's wrong with the junior? The junior doesn't know the rules, so he needs to be taught a lesson. If there's no seat, you find it yourself. Do you really think you're someone important and insist on sitting in the front row?" The middle-aged martial artist frowned and said, "Chu Xiu, this time you took our seat first. We don't want to cause trouble, but don't go too far. Don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you've become the governor of the Jinwu Hall. The dignity of the imperial court is not for you to use." When Chu Xiu heard his tone, he suddenly felt that something was wrong. He frowned and said, "You're from the Northern Yen Imperial Court?" The middle-aged man was also stunned. A hint of anger emerged on his face as he said, "You don't know me?" From his tone, it was as if it was a crime for Chu Xiu not to know him. Chu Xiu said lightly, "Why should I know you?" The middle-aged man said coldly, "I'm the general of the Northern Guard Army, Ren Qianli." The Northern Yen National Five Armies were basically the strongest force in the Northern Yen military, just like the West Hill Army under Xiang Wu's control. This Ren Qianli was actually the general of the Northern Guard Army, one of the five armies. His status was enough to rank in the top 5 of the entire Northern Yen military. But to be honest, besides Xiang Wu, he really didn't know much about the Northern Yen military. Chu Xiu was only cooperating with the Northern Yen military. He had never said that he would be loyal to Xiang Long. The Jinwu Hall was only in charge of the Jianghu, not the imperial court. Therefore, Chu Xiu couldn't be bothered to know about the Northern Yen military. Anyway, it had nothing to do with him. But what did the Northern Yen military mean by appearing here? Could it be that Xiang Long had sent someone else? Chu Xiu didn't think too much about it. He said faintly, "So it's General Ren. My apologies for not recognizing you. But General Ren, you better remember one thing. You are the general of the Northern Guard Army, and I am also the viceroy of the Jinwu Hall. According to Her Majesty, you and I are of the same rank. If you want to teach me a lesson, other than Her Majesty, you are not qualified." Ren Qianli's eyes revealed a touch of coldness. Just as he was about to say something, he was stopped by Han Tian, who had rushed over. "Sir Ren, calm down. It's just a seat. I will arrange it. Today is the great ancestor's birthday. It won't be good for anyone if things get out of hand." Ren Qianli snorted coldly and was pulled away by Han Tian. Chu Xiu sat back down. Mei Qinglian chuckled and said, "As the viceroy of the Jinwu Hall, you are too incompetent. You can't even recognize the general of the 5 armies of the Northern Yen National 5 armies." Chu Xiu said faintly, "Ever since I became the viceroy, I haven't been idle at all. Where would I find the time to look at their information?" "What? Do you have some understanding of them? Tell me about them." Mei Qinglian said, "I don't know much about them, but I have read some information. In any case, they are better than you. This person is a veteran of the Northern Yen military. However, he wasn't groomed by the imperial court. Instead, he is from the pugilistic world. However, he is not from a sect or an aristocratic family. His master, Empty Valley Master Fang Jinwu, is a famous figure in the Northern Yen pugilistic world. He is very experienced and has some friendship with the great ancestor of the Northern Floating Snow City. His appearance here is probably not on behalf of the imperial court." Chapter 719. Throughout the history of the Jianghu, those who could become martial Dao grandmasters as rogue cultivators were few and far between, and those who could achieve the true fire spirit refinement state were even rarer. Fang Jinwu was one of them, and Chu Xiu had heard of his name. This person was neither good nor evil, and it was said that he had a rough background. In his early years, he dominated the Northern Yen pugilistic world. He was slightly younger than the old ancestor of the Northern Floating Snow City, but he was already over 300 years old, and his blood and qi were declining. When he was old, Fang Jinwu went into seclusion in the Empty Valley in the south of Yen Kingdom. That was how he got the title of Empty Valley Lord. However, Fang Jinwu was only in closed-door seclusion. He wasn't like the old ancestor of the Drift Snow City in the extreme north, who was simply using all sorts of methods to drag out an ignoble existence. Mei Qinglian raised her eyebrows and said, "Ren Qianli is a disciple that Fang Jinwu took in after he went into seclusion. He is extremely talented and took less than 30 years to step into the realm of a martial arts grandmaster. And because his master is not from a sect or family, the Northern Yen Imperial Court is very confident in him. With his military exploits, he was promoted to a high position. Also, because he is half a member of the pugilistic world, before you came, Ren Qianli was in charge of almost all the pugilistic world affairs in the Northern Yen. The young man just now should be Ren Qianli's junior, Chen Jinting. I heard that Fang Jinwu accepted another young man as his disciple in recent years, so it should be Chen Jinting. So, I was the one who blocked his path? No wonder he felt that Ren Qianli seemed to be very hostile towards him. Now it seemed that Ren Qianli had been unhappy with him for a long time. Of course Chu Xiu didn't care. There were many people in the pugilistic world who disliked him, and he didn't care about Ren Qianli. At this time Bai Wuji walked straight to Chu Xiu and stood beside Chu Xiu. "Official Chu, long time no see." Bai Wuji's voice was a little sad. Chu Xiu didn't expect that Bai Wuji would take the initiative to greet him. Chu Xiu and Bai Wuji were old acquaintances, they had known each other since they were still in the Xiantian realm. However, not to mention Chu Xiu, who had already jumped out of the dragon and tiger list, Bai Wuji couldn't even be compared to Xie Xiaolu and the others. After cultivating for so long, Bai Wuji had only just reached the 5 cheese gathering origin stage, and his battle prowess had not been tempered yet, so his battle prowess couldn't be considered too strong. So now that they were in 2 different worlds, Chu Xiu didn't even bother to look for trouble with Bai Wuji. Of course that was if Bai Wuji didn't mess with him. Seeing that Bai Wuji wasn't hostile, Chu Xiu nodded. "Yes, it has indeed been a long time." Bai Wuji raised his cup and toasted Chu Xiu. "Brother Chu, you and I did have some conflicts in the past, but at that time, we were both young and full of vigor. After so many years, I've come to accept it. The grudges we had when we were young are really laughable. In our generation, you and the young celestial master have both stepped out of the dragon and tiger list. Your future is limitless. It is sad to be born in the same generation as you two, but at the same time, it is also a blessing. Let's drink." With that, Bai Wuji took a step forward and toasted to Chu Xiu again, then turned around and left. Mei Qinglian was surprised. "Oh, this Bai clan's kid seems to understand. It's not easy." Chu Xiu drank a cup of wine and secretly gave Mei Qinglian a piece of paper. There were no words written on it, but if you looked closely, you would see that it was written with an extremely meticulous internal force, and it would disappear after a while. There was only one sentence written on the paper, and it looked like it was written in a hurry. "Brother Chu, save me. I am willing to give you the whereabouts of the yin and yang sorrowful poem in exchange for Brother Chu's help." When Bai Wuji walked towards him and said those words, he felt something was wrong, because it didn't seem like Bai Wuji's style. Bai Wuji didn't have many flaws, his only flaw was that he was too arrogant. Back in the Northern Yen, he looked down on Chu Xiu and even Ye Donglu. Later, when he came to the Jianghu, he thought that the people on the dragon and tiger list were all mediocre. It wasn't until he was severely defeated by Shin Bai's sword that his temper stabilized a little. However, the words he said just now didn't seem like something Bai Wuji would say. It wasn't until he drank the last cup of wine and Bai Wuji handed him the paper, that Chu Xiu was sure that his guess was right. Bai Wuji really had some problems, some concerns, and even to the point that he didn't dare to say it out loud. The contents of the paper must have been hastily written down after seeing Chu Xiu. There were only 2 thoughts in the paper, one was to save him, and the other was that as long as Chu Xiu saved him, Chu Wuji would give him the whereabouts of one of the great sorrowful poems of yin and yang in exchange. As for what kind of crisis he encountered in the northern floating snow city, and how he wanted Bai Wuji to save him, the paper didn't say anything, or rather, Bai Wuji didn't have the time to write so many things. Mei Qinglian was flabbergasted as she transmitted her voice. "What do you mean?" Chu Xiu's face had an unfathomable smile. "I don't know what it means, but I do know that it's very interesting." Initially, he thought that coming to the northern floating snow city was just a formality. Who would have thought that he would encounter such an interesting matter? What secret was the northern floating snow cities Bai clan hiding exactly? At this moment, Bai Hanfeng noticed Bai Wuji's actions. He couldn't help but frown. "City Lord, why is Wuji looking for Chu Xiu? Could he be thinking of something bad?" Bai Hantian calmly replied, "Seeing a genius like Chu Xiu, he's just feeling a little emotional. Don't worry, since he's my son, and also the successor that the northern floating snow city nurtured with all their resources, he should be willing to pay the price for the sake of the northern floating snow city. For the sake of the greater picture, he should know what to do." Bai Hanfeng sighed and shook his head. If it wasn't for the greater picture, the northern floating snow city wouldn't be willing to sacrifice such a talented genius like Bai Wuji. "It's almost time." City Lord, let's begin. Bai Hanfeng spoke. Bai Hantian nodded his head. He then stood up and spoke to the crowd in a low voice. Everyone, this isn't the first time that our Drifts Now City has come to offer our well wishes. However, we still have to express our gratitude. Our Drifts Now City truly thanks everyone for their support. Some of the people present listened attentively, while others secretly rolled their eyes. You also know that this isn't the first time you're offering your well wishes? Why must you do this? Must you wait until the old ancestor of the northern floating snow city dies? However, the people present didn't say anything. This could be considered as giving Bai Hantian some face. At this moment, Bai Hantian was still feeling very good about himself. He paused for a moment before continuing. However, the birthday celebration this time around is different from the past. It's the 400th birthday of my old ancestor. Hence, when everyone departs, my northern floating snow city will also present a gift to all of you. Upon hearing this, everyone was stunned. In the past they would always send gifts. But this time around, the northern floating snow city was finally generous and changed to a gift? Next, I would like to invite the old ancestor to say a few words. Bai Hantian waved his hands as someone opened up a gate. Instantly, a wave of extreme coldness gushed forth. This was none other than the aura of the old ancestor of the Drifts Now City. The pressure of a true fire expert at the spirit refinement realm didn't seem to be weakened at all. For so many years, the old ancestor of the Drifts Now City didn't even show his face once. In fact, when some major events happened in the past, he would always sit in the Drifts Now City. This also caused many people to secretly laugh at the old ancestor of the Drifts Now City. A true fire spirit refinement realm expert was actually so cowardly. But from the looks of it now, although the old ancestor was cowardly, at the very least it was effective. If the old ancestor was more aggressive in his actions and caused his early death, the northern floating snow city would no longer have a true fire spirit refinement realm expert guarding it. Their prestige would definitely be much lower than it was now. This old man can't thank everyone enough for attending this old man's birthday celebration. After living for 400 years, this old man has seen too many things. Now, if I can live for another year, I will count it as another year. Whether or not I can meet everyone in the next 10 years is still an unknown. If it's not convenient for this old man to meet everyone, everyone knows that. Hence, I can only thank everyone here for coming. Someone immediately said, "Old senior, please live for 10,000 years. Please don't say such inauspicious words." The old ancestor of the northern floating snow city chuckled. Living for 10,000 years? Old ancestor doesn't have the extravagant hope of living for that long. Alright, this old man won't say anything more. Everyone please do as you please. As the sound of his voice faded, the pressure of the true fire spirit refinement realm disappeared. This caused everyone to heave a sigh of relief. Chu Xiu's brows twitched. He suddenly felt a little awkward. The true fire spirit refinement realm pressure was real, but why did he feel that this old ancestor of the northern floating snow city was a little cocky? Everyone had the pressure of a martial artist. Generally speaking, this kind of pressure would only be obvious when one reached the realm of unity of heaven and man. However, whether it was a martial artist at the realm of unity of heaven and man or a martial Dao grandmaster like Chu Xiu, as long as they were not at daggers drawn and facing the enemy, who would be so bored as to always expose their pressure. Did they have to show off their status as an expert at the realm of unity of heaven and man or a martial Dao grandmaster? Perhaps there were such weirdos in the pugilistic world. However, the old ancestor of the northern floating snow city had already reached the true fire spirit refinement realm, and yet he was still so cocky. No matter how he looked at it, he felt that it was a little childish. At this moment, Bai Hantian said in a deep voice, "According to the rules, every time the old ancestor's birthday celebration, there will be an outstanding disciple who will be taught by the old ancestor. Among the young people of this generation, my son Bai Wuji is the undisputed number one in the younger generation of the northern floating snow city. So this time, there is no need for a competition to choose the candidate. Let Wuji be the one." As soon as he said this, some of the young disciples of the northern floating snow city revealed looks of envy and jealousy. At the same time, they were a little unconvinced, thinking that Bai Hantian was abusing his power for personal gain. He actually cancelled the competition and let his son be taught by the old ancestor. That was a powerhouse at the true fire spirit refinement realm. Chapter 720. Based on Chu Xiu's personality, he didn't like to meddle in other people's business. If it was any other sect, he would just treat it as a joke. But this time it was the northern floating snow city, and Bai Wuji said he knew the whereabouts of the sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang. This was something Chu Xiu couldn't ignore. Although he didn't know if the sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang that Bai Wuji knew was the one he wanted. After all, the sorrowful poem had been scattered throughout the pugilistic world, and everyone might have a copy of it. Just like the annihilating heaven and earth annihilating oblivion killing fist, it should be the most widely spread of the 7 sorrowful poems. Many in the Eastern Qi army practiced this technique. But looking at Bai Wuji's expression, it was obvious that he couldn't tell Chu Xiu what the technique was. It was up to Chu Xiu to ask for it himself. So at this moment, Chu Xiu suddenly stood up and said, "Governor Bai, I have admired Senior Bai for a long time and would like to pay him a visit. I would like to go with Brother Bai." When Bai Wuji saw Chu Xiu step forward, a look of relief appeared in his eyes. On the other hand, Bai Hantian's expression changed slightly. Bai Hantian coughed and said, "Ever since the great ancestor went into seclusion a few decades ago, he has never received any guests. Even during the birthday celebration he would only say a few words, so I hope Lord Chu will be magnanimous enough to forgive me." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Governor Bai, this doesn't make sense. It's fine if he doesn't receive guests under normal circumstances, but since Brother Bai wants to enter and receive guidance from Senior Bai, he must speak to him. What Brother Bai can see him but I can't? Is the elder ancestor of the Bai clan, an expert in the true fire spirit ascension realm that can't be seen?" Bai Hantian's face darkened and he said in a cold voice, "Chu Xiu, what do you mean by that? How dare you insult my elder in my floating snow city? Do you have a death wish?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Governor Bai, don't be so angry. I've already said that I just want to meet the elder ancestor. Is it that difficult?" Bai Hantian waved his hand and said, "Our elder ancestor does not receive guests." Chu Xiu took a step forward and said, "What elder ancestor does not receive guests?" Everyone at the scene was dumbfounded. Why did they suddenly quarrel? Why was Chu Xiu so insistent on meeting elder ancestor Bai? Just as the atmosphere was at daggers drawn, Qin Jinting, who had previously clashed with Chu Xiu, suddenly stood up and said, "Lord Chu's words are somewhat unreasonable. It's their business whether they want to meet or not. I've heard of forced buying and selling, but I've never heard of forcing people to meet. What an interesting hobby." Everyone turned to look at Qin Jinting. They wanted to see who had the guts to rub Chu Xiu's whiskers. When they saw that this person was Qin Jinting, everyone had a look of understanding on their faces. Qin Jinting was not famous in the northern Yan pugilistic world. He was not old but he was not young either. He did not have any notable achievements, so he was not even on the Longhu leaderboard. However, his master, Fang Jinwu, was known by everyone in the northern Yan pugilistic world. There were very few martial Dao masters who were rogue cultivators, and true fire spirit ascension realm powerhouses who were rogue cultivators were even rarer. Even the first seat of the Great Light Temple would pay him a visit when he passed by the empty valley. They were very polite. Qin Jinting was Fang Jinwu's disciple, and given Fang Jinwu's age he would not be able to take in any other disciples. Therefore Qin Jinting was almost like a closed-door disciple. His status was not ordinary. He might not be comparable to Chu Xiu, but at least he would not be afraid of Chu Xiu. Ren Qianli wanted to pull Qin Jinting back, but he failed to do so. He could only stand beside Qin Jinting and guard against Chu Xiu's sudden attack. Others might not know Chu Xiu, but Ren Qianli had studied Chu Xiu's information in detail. This person was a little crazy. When others thought he would not attack, he would attack. He could not be understood with common sense. Chu Xiu looked at Qin Jinting and said with narrowed eyes, "One must know one's limits. Do you know why you're not on the Longhu leaderboard even though your background is not bad?" Although Qin Jinting knew that nothing good would come out of Chu Xiu's mouth, he could not help but ask, "Why?" As martial arts practitioners of the younger generation, both Zhang Qingjin and Chu Xiu stood at the peak of their peers. However, the envy, jealousy, and hatred that Chu Xiu received was more than Zhang Qingjin's. The reason was simple. Zhang Qingjin had been famous for too long. Even from the moment he was born, he had been shrouded in a halo. Therefore, when Zhang Qingjin was young, he had already endured all the envy, jealousy, and hatred. Now everyone was even used to it. No matter what unexpected breakthrough Zhang Qingjin made, everyone felt that it was very normal. This was because he was Zhang Qingjin. Chu Xiu, on the other hand, was different. Although he was a martial arts practitioner from the Yinma clan, everyone in the martial arts world knew that he was actually born in the wilderness. Among the top 10 of the Longhu leaderboard, no one was born lower than him. Moreover, Chu Xiu was a dark horse, surpassing many of the elites on the Longhu leaderboard. He even surpassed Zhong Xian, who had been thought to be able to compete with Zhang Qingjun, and stepped into the realm of martial arts master. This was very surprising. The result of his reputation and strength rising too quickly was that Chu Xiu would inevitably face the suspicion and subconscious hostility of many people. Now, Chu Xiu's aura was so strong that it made her heart palpitate indescribably. However, she felt that the power was very unfamiliar, as if it did not belong to Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu didn't realize these things. He simply said to Ren Qianli faintly, "General Ren, this has nothing to do with you. Since you are here to offer your blessings, then do it well. Just take care of your junior brother and don't be a busybody." Ren Qianli did not say anything, but his eyes flashed with a deep sense of fear. Ren Qianli pulled Chen Jinting aside and secretly transmitted a message to him. He scolded, "Junior, what did I tell you before? Even if Master is around, don't stir up trouble in the underworld. After all, Master is a rogue cultivator. He is alone and does not have the backing of a big sect. Now that Master is around, you can be more relaxed. However, if one day Master is gone, what will you do? I want to protect you, but the underworld is so big, and there is more than one existence that I can't afford to provoke. Take Chu Xiu for example. In the imperial court, he is the viceroy of Jinwu Hall personally appointed by Her Majesty. He is also on good terms with General Xiang Wu of the West Hill Army. In the underworld, he is the successor of the Yinma clan. Do you know how much power the Yinma clan has hidden in the dark? Even Master is not willing to provoke them easily." Chen Jinting lowered his head as his eyes revealed a wisp of unwillingness, and he only explained, "I just can't stand the sight of Chu Xiu being so arrogant and overbearing. Moreover, he's the one who snatched senior brother's position. Her Majesty established the Jinwu Hall to find someone who has deep connections with the underworld to be the viceroy. No matter how I look at it, this person should be you, senior. In the end, your position was snatched by Chu Xiu." "What?" Ren Qianli snorted and said, "I don't need you to stand up for me in my matters. Just take care of yourself. Remember, don't talk too much later." Chapter 721. Chen Jinting had little experience in the Jianghu and was easily swayed by his own emotions. However, Ren Qianli was a veteran of the Jianghu. Furthermore, he had gained experience in the imperial court and fought with others. He could already tell that something was wrong with the current situation. It was best to watch the show and try not to get involved. Seeing that Chu Xiu was looking at him again, Bai Hantian immediately said, "Everyone, the birthday celebration is over. The elder ancestor is preparing to impart martial arts to the younger generation. Please go back." However, Chu Xiu did not leave. Instead, he took a step forward and smiled. "What's the hurry? I've already said that as long as I can see Senior Bai, I'll leave immediately." "Chu Xiu, you're deliberately looking for trouble." As soon as he finished speaking, Bai Hantian waved his hand. Immediately, a large number of disciples from the fluttering snow city rushed out and glared at Chu Xiu and the others. Some of these people were preparing to activate the formation, while others were holding crossbows and pointing them at Chu Xiu and the others. Ordinary crossbows were naturally unable to deal with martial Dao grandmasters. The crossbows in their hands were all specially made with runes carved on them. Although a martial Dao grandmaster could easily destroy or dodge a single crossbow, the power of thousands of crossbow bolts shooting at the same time was still very shocking. Seeing this scene, Pang Hu and Mei Qinglian both looked vigilant and stood beside Chu Xiu. However, at this time, a smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. Chu Xiu felt a little strange coming to the birthday celebration of the elder ancestor of the fluttering snow city. Perhaps others were used to it and felt that it was normal, but this time Chu Xiu felt very awkward. It was not until Bai Wuji secretly sent him a message that Chu Xiu had a vague guess in his heart. Of course, this was only a guess and Chu Xiu still needed to verify it. If he guessed correctly, the Drift Snow city of the extreme north would be in big trouble. If he guessed wrongly, he would have to face the pursuit of a true fire spirit refinement realm expert. Naturally, Chu Xiu did not dare to fight head-on against an expert in the true fire spiritual refinement realm. However, he had survived when he faced Sir God Luo in the past. Now that he was facing an old expert in the true fire spiritual refinement realm, he naturally had the confidence to escape. However, from the looks of it, he probably wouldn't have the chance to fight with the true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse. Chu Xiu had caused such a ruckus here, but in the end, the old ancestor of the northern fluttering snow city still hadn't appeared. This person was either enduring to the extreme or there was something fishy about it. The more Bai Hantian tried to hide it, the more it looked like he was putting on a strong front. Holding the heavenly demon dance in his hand, Chu Xiu sneered and said, "You're right. I'm looking for trouble. Bai Hantan, His Majesty has given you face by asking me to negotiate with you. But in the end you don't want it. Don't blame me for being ruthless." Originally, Chu Xiu couldn't find an excuse to cause trouble here. Originally, he was prepared to use the grudges of the past as an excuse. However, it just so happened that he thought of the matter with Xianglong, so he directly said it out. This sentence was very effective. Previously, there were some forces who were on good terms with the Drifts Now city of the extreme north who were ready to intervene. However, as soon as they heard Chu Xiu's words, they immediately gave up on the idea. If this matter had been decided by Chu Xiu himself and he was stirring up trouble here, then they could have acted openly. However, now that the Northern Yin Imperial Court was involved, they had no choice but to be cautious. It was better not to intervene in some matters. When Bai Hantian heard that this was the reason why Chu Xiu was so unforgiving towards the Bai family, he felt a little regretful. Previously, Chu Xiu had already told him that the Imperial Court wanted to station troops in the extreme north. Their main defense was not the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, but the Great Light Temple. However, in that case, the Drifts Now city of the extreme north would also be subject to some restrictions. In addition, he was afraid that it would affect the reputation of the Drifts Now city of the extreme north, and the people of the Jianghu would think that he was afraid of Chu Xiu and the Imperial Court. Therefore he did not agree for a while. In the end, who would have thought that this Chu Xiu would be crazy enough to directly cause trouble in the Drifts Now city of the extreme north? In desperation, Bai Hantian turned his gaze towards the house where the Bai family's elder ancestor was in seclusion. The door opened once again and a powerful pressure belonging to the true fire spirit refinement realm descended, several times more violent than before. "How dare you? Is the Drifts Now city of the extreme north a place where you can behave atrociously? On account of the fact that you're a member of the Imperial Court, I'll let you live. Hurry up and scram." At this moment, a strange smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. "Let me live? Sorry, I'm a stubborn person. I don't like to walk the path of life, but I like to walk the path of death." As soon as he finished speaking, the heavenly demon dance in Chu Xiu's hand slashed down, bringing with it a monstrous demonic aura and bloodlust chi that erupted. The demonic nature of this slash was so strong that even the hearts of the people present could not help but tremble. Moreover, the most shocking thing was that this slash of Chu Xiu's was aimed directly at the door where the Bai family's elder ancestor was in seclusion. What was he trying to do? Was he getting too full of himself and preparing to challenge a powerhouse in the true fire spirit refinement realm? Although everyone present admitted that Chu Xiu's strength was indeed very strong, although he had just stepped into the martial Dao Grandmaster realm, for some people, just entering this realm was already the peak. Although Chu Xiu had not yet reached the peak of the martial Dao True Pellet realm, at least he could beat over 80% of the martial artists in the same realm. However, no matter how strong Chu Xiu was, he was only at the martial Dao True Pellet realm. In the face of a powerhouse at the true fire spirit refinement realm, even if the opponent was a little old, his chances of winning would not be high. To be precise, Chu Xiu would not have a chance of winning. There were only two endings: escaping in a sorry state or being beheaded on the spot. Bai Hantian's expression changed drastically when he saw this scene. He shouted angrily, "Everyone stop Chu Xiu!" As soon as his voice fell, Bai Hantian struck out with his palm. The powerful ice palm force froze everything. Wherever the palm force passed, everything was frozen. The earth energy condensed the water vapor in the air and turned it into an ice dragon, smashing down on Chu Xiu's head. At the same time, countless sword momentum shining with earth energy shrouded Chu Xiu. There were also array patterns shining on the ground, turning into a force that attacked Chu Xiu and the other two. This was the foundation of a big sect. Even if there were no martial Dao Grandmaster realm powerhouses, they could block a strong enemy with just some external objects. "Help me hold the line." As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, he directly smashed the ice dragon slash and rushed towards Bai Hantian. Pang Hu and Mei Qinglian were there to help Chu Xiu resist the array and the seemingly endless arrows. This kind of fighting style made Mei Qinglian and Pang Hu very uncomfortable. They would rather charge forward and kill than be besieged by a group of people here. This was the foundation of a big sect. Even if there were no martial Dao Grandmasters, they could still rely on external objects to make the opponent retreat. The last time Bai Hantian saw Chu Xiu was not yet a martial Dao Grandmaster. At that time, the scene of him killing Nye Renlong had already left a deep impression on him. Chu Xiu's strongest point was not his saber technique or his internal strength, but Chu Xiu's terrifying explosive power. This kind of explosive power was the most despairing. With such a sudden attack, even if one did not die, they would be seriously injured. At that time, Chu Xiu was able to kill Nie Rinlong. Now that Chu Xiu had successfully advanced to the martial Dao True Pellet realm, his strength was even more unfathomable to Bai Hantian. But no matter how unfathomable he was, he still had to make a move. Otherwise, the thousands of years of foundation of the fluttering snow city in the extreme north would be in danger. The cold air was bone-chilling and an icy blue array formation condensed beneath Chu Xiu's feet. As Bai Hantian formed a seal with his hands, huge icicles appeared beneath his feet like long spears, piercing towards Chu Xiu with boundless sharpness. With the heaven's sun gazing at air technique, an attack of this level could not even touch Chu Xiu, and he easily dodged it. However, after the ice spears missed, they exploded directly, exuding a bone-chilling chill that penetrated into Chu Xiu's body, as if it was freezing and stagnating his true qi. Moreover, this kind of power was so evil that Chu Xiu could not get rid of it for a while, and it actually made his movements slower and slower. This was the disadvantage of making a move in someone else's territory. You had no idea how many trump cards the other party had, and how many arrangements they had. On the contrary, your preparation was the least. Bai Hantian took advantage of this opportunity, and the chill in his hands intensified. He stretched out his hand, and the boundless ice aura condensed into an azure blue spear. With a powerful momentum that could shake mountains and rivers, it went straight for Chu Xiu. Form without momentum, the difference is too great. Martial artists who used long weapons like spears and halberds focused on momentum and directly suppressed others with force. Just like Lu Fengxian, when his ancient halberd smashed down, it was as though he was crushing a mountain. Although Luo Feiheng was a woman, her spear technique was also big and domineering. Now Bai Hantian's so-called spear technique was not even comparable to Luo Feiheng. At the moment when the ice spear was about to pierce him, Chu Xiu put away his sword and formed a seal. His body suddenly burned with a scorching Buddhist light. The great sun-shifting technique was cast to the extreme by Chu Xiu. In an instant, the qi and blood around his body seemed to be burning, and it directly expelled the cold air. The shadow of Vairocana shone behind Chu Xiu. He put his palms together and the Buddha's seal fell. The ice spear was directly shattered, and Bai Hantian was also blasted back a few steps, causing his face to flush red. At the same time, Chu Xiu did not stop. He did not continue to attack Bai Hantian, but directly struck with his palm. The power of the great sun-shifting technique exploded to the extreme, and in the blink of an eye, it smashed the array in front of Elder Ancestor Bai's place of seclusion. Even the door had collapsed. At this time, everyone present felt that something was wrong. Chu Xiu was openly attacking in the fluttering snow city of the far north. He was simply arrogant to the extreme. Why was Elder Ancestor Bai not attacking? Could it be that something had happened to Elder Ancestor Bai? Seeing that Chu Xiu was about to attack, Bai Hantian's face was full of fear. He wanted to stop him, but he was not faster than Chu Xiu's speed. Another Buddha's seal fell, directly smashing Elder Ancestor Bai's place of seclusion. What appeared in front of everyone was not the true fire spirit ascension powerhouse that they had imagined, but a mummy protected by an array. It was still emitting the coercion of a true fire spirit ascension powerhouse. Bai Hanfeng, who had not shown himself, stood beside the mummy, activating the array. In an instant, everyone seemed to have understood everything. Chapter 722. No one present was a fool. The moment they saw the mummy, they thought of what the drifting snow city had done previously. All of this was obvious enough. Why did the elder ancestor of the drifting snow city not show up for so many years? Because he was long dead. Why did the elder ancestor of the drifting snow city have to be so smug and hold a birthday celebration every 10 years? That was because Bai Hantian and the others were afraid that outsiders would find out that the elder ancestor of the drifting snow city had died. Hence, they tried their best to cover it up, and the best way to do so was to put the truth before everyone's eyes. Seeing this scene, Bai Hantian and Bai Hanfeng's faces turned extremely pale. Exposed. The secret they had been covering up for decades had finally been exposed. In fact, the elder ancestor of the drifting snow city had been dead for a long time. Not long after he began his seclusion, he suffered a setback during his cultivation, causing his old injuries to relapse and he died. At that time, Bai Hantian did not dare to leak this news at all, because the drifting snow city had offended too many people. After Elder Ancestor Bai stepped into the true fire spirit refinement state, the fluttering snow city of the extreme north began to expand crazily. During this period they had offended many people and made many enemies. Perhaps even the fluttering snow city of the extreme north didn't know. It was because of the Bai family's old ancestor that the Drifts Now city could be so fearless. However, if the Bai family's old ancestor were to die, the Drifts Now city would face a situation that Bai Hantian didn't even dare to think about. Hence, in a moment of desperation, Bai Hantian came up with this trick. He used the secret array of the drifting snow city to preserve a portion of the corpse's energy. Then, during the birthday celebration every 10 years, Bai Hanfeng would hide inside and imitate the elder ancestor's speech. He would use the array to release his aura, all to create a false impression that the elder ancestor was still alive. However, the Bai family's array was not used to preserve corpses, but to preserve the living. If some martial artists were to fall into a state of near death due to their injuries, they could use this array to hang on to their last breath until a way to save them could be found. However, the energy consumed by this formation was not ordinary. Instead, it was blood that had a close relationship with this cultivator. Furthermore, it was very young and full of vitality. Over the years, during every birthday celebration, the Bai clan would choose a young disciple with outstanding talent to donate his blood and pour it into the formation. The blood would be able to maintain the formation for 10 years. Although the martial artists who gave their blood would not die, their vitality would be greatly damaged and they would basically be crippled for the rest of their lives. And because they saw something they shouldn't have seen, although they were all disciples of the Drifts Now city, Bai Hantian also knew that not every disciple would be willing to sacrifice their future for the sake of their clan. In order to ensure that they would not divulge these things, Bai Hantian had to lock them all up. To the outside world, he claimed that these people had all gone into seclusion after receiving pointers from the patriarch. After that, they had gone out to roam the Jianghu and had yet to return. This kind of excuse could be used once or twice, but the more it was used, the more people in the Drifts Now city began to feel that something was wrong. Some even began to suspect it. Bai Wuji was one of them. However, he didn't believe that his father would harm him. At first he didn't pay attention to it. But later he accidentally discovered some clues and began to investigate. But the final truth made him shudder. His father actually intended to sacrifice him as fuel for a dead man. At this time Bai Wuji stood beside him. His presence was extremely low, but there was a touch of sorrow in his eyes. He remembered the time when the Drifts Now city of the Drifts Now city joined forces with Chu Xiu to attack the morgue. Chu Xiu killed Nie Donglu, but the result was that Nie Renlong was enraged and even turned into a demon. At that time Bai Wuji wanted to ask Bai Hantian if he was killed, would he also risk his life to avenge him like Nie Renlong? However, for fear of hurting their relationship, Bai Wuji didn't ask this question. But now there was no need to ask this question. Reality had told Bai Wuji everything. In Bai Hantian's eyes, the interests of the Drifts Now city were placed above his son. Anyway, he had more than one son. And this time he wasn't going to kill Bai Wuji. Even a vicious tiger wouldn't eat its cubs. But he raised this son of his, and now he wanted to borrow something from him. Was it wrong? At this time Chu Xiu had a mocking smile on his face. He shook his head and said, "The city lord Bai, to be honest, I didn't expect you to be so playful. You actually used a dead man to scare the entire martial arts world of the far north for so many years. TSK, you've got some ideas. Chu Xiu, you deserve to die." Bai Hantian's face instantly contorted as he attacked Chu Xiu in a frenzy. At the same time Bai Hanfeng did the same. His face was filled with rage as he charged towards Chu Xiu. The two brothers had hidden this secret for so many years. As long as they could keep it a secret until the Bai clan produced another strong cultivator in the true fire spirit refinement realm, then the elder ancestor of the Bai clan could pass away in peace. But in the end all of this was ruined by Chu Xiu. Now that the secret was exposed, the news would spread throughout the northern Yen martial arts world the next day. The Drifts Now city of the far north would become the target of public criticism. In the past, the martial artists who had a grudge against the Drifts Now city of the far north would be plotting how to get revenge. Even the forces in front of them would definitely be dissatisfied with the Drifts Now city of the far north. For so many years, how many gifts had they given to the Drifts Now city? They had all given them to a dead man. For so many years, they had actually given birthday wishes to a dead man. Now that they thought about it, it was simply bad luck. Chu Xiu retreated. The power of his primordial spirit condensed into arrows, and the soul destroyer arrows shot out one after another. His mental strength was so strong that it left people speechless. Several arrows shot out at the same time, temporarily stopping Bai Hantian and Bai Hanfeng. He then turned to Mei Qinglian and Pang Hu and shouted, "Let's go!" The matter of the Drifts Now city of the far north had been exposed. There was no need for Chu Xiu to continue fighting with Bai Hantian and the others here. After all, the Drifts Now city of the far north had a legacy of thousands of years. If Chu Xiu and his two companions wanted to annihilate them, it would be too simple of them. In the Drifts Now city of the far north, there must be some hidden trump cards. However, the Drifts Now city of the far north would have a headache. They would have to face countless enemies that they had offended in the past as well as the present. If these people came alone, they would not be a match for the Drifts Now city of the far north. But if they all came together, the Drifts Now city of the far north would have a hard time. When Pang Hu and Mei Qinglian saw that Chu Xiu wanted to leave, they also managed to escape in time. Those ordinary disciples of the Drifts Now city of the far north might be able to hold them back for a while with the help of external objects. But if they wanted to leave, these people would not be able to stop them. Before leaving, Chu Xiu deliberately cast a discreet glance at Bai Wuji and made a hand gesture. He believed that Bai Wuji would understand and that Bai Wuji would not dare to lie to him. This matter was leaked by Bai Wuji. His weakness was in the hands of Chu Xiu. If he dared to lie to Chu Xiu would only need to tell Bai Hantian about it. Bai Hantian believed that Bai Hantian would definitely be enraged to the point of placing righteousness before family. Seeing that Chu Xiu and his companions had retreated so easily, Bai Hantian's expression was gloomy. But he did not give chase. Firstly, with the strength of Chu Xiu and his companions once they left the Drifts Now city of the far north, if he chased after them, it would be hard to say who would be the one to kill who. Moreover, there was still a huge problem waiting for them. Some of the people present directly flicked their sleeves and left, sneering, "Your extreme north Snowfall City played a good game, but you played us like idiots. We will remember this lesson. In the future, your extreme north Snowfall City can play by themselves." With that, everyone turned around and left. Bai Hantian wanted to stop them, but he didn't know how. Ren Qianli also left with a somewhat dumbfounded look on his face as he watched Chen Jinting leave. Evidently, he had yet to recover from the series of changes. Seeing Chen Jinting's expression, Ren Qianli couldn't help but scoff. "What did you see?" The most important thing to do in Jianghu was to cultivate one's strength to perfection. On what basis did he, Chu Xiu, dare to stir up such a storm in the Drifts Now city today? Just because even if he guessed wrongly and the old ancestor of the Drifts Now city was still alive, he had the confidence to flee for his life. With your current strength you still want to challenge Chu Xiu? You're far from it. Ren Qianli wasn't teaching Chen Jinting a lesson. Instead, he wanted his junior to completely understand what path he should take in the future. In this lifetime, his master had only accepted the two of them as disciples. Moreover, the gap between the two of them was too big, so there was no competition between them. Instead, Ren Qianli hoped that Chen Jinting could stand out. After all, Fang Jinwu was old. The old ancestor of the Drifts Now city had been dead for so many years, and it was unknown how long Fang Jinwu could live. In the northern Yan court, Ren Qianli actually had no backing. His backer was Fang Jinwu. When Fang Jinwu died one day, only he and Chen Jinting would be left. If Chen Jinting could work hard, the two of them could still support each other. At this time, after Chu Xiu and the others left the city, they didn't leave immediately. Instead, they waited about 10 miles away from the Drifts Now city. Previously, he gave Bai Wuji a hand signal, asking him to follow this direction, and he would be able to find them. He believed that Bai Wuji would come. Pang Hu scratched his head and clicked his tongue as he shook his head. These people from the large sects are really cunning. They could even think of such a trick and even deceive others for decades. After so many years, no one discovered it. Mei Qinglian said, "It's not that no one found out, but that even if they did, no one dared to try it." As she said this, Mei Qinglian glanced at Chu Xiu. "After all, there aren't many people as bold as you in the pugilistic world. I say, aren't you afraid that you guessed wrong and that the Bai family's old ancestor is still alive?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "If I guessed wrong, then I guessed wrong. Who can guarantee that they'll always be right? Even if the Bai family's old ancestor is still alive, he's probably a pile of bones in a grave. I can't beat an old man like him, but I can still escape." Chapter 723. Bai Wuji still came, but he was still a little absent-minded. Of course, anyone would have reacted the same way. My father doesn't love me and he wants to use my blood as fuel. It's a real tragedy. Unfortunately, Bai Wuji didn't have the same fate as the male lead, so he had to rely on Chu Xiu to save him. Moreover, Chu Xiu wasn't the kind of guy who had no sympathy. The first thing he asked was, You said you know the location of the sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang? Bai Wuji looked a little absent-minded, but in front of Chu Xiu he didn't dare to lie. He immediately nodded and said, I know, I'm not lying to you. Where is it? What's the name of the cultivation method? Bai Wuji said, it's in the hands of the empty valleys Fang Jinwu. The name of the cultivation method is the great soul-searching palm of despair. Hearing this, Chu Xiu's eyes flashed with coldness. He looked at Bai Wuji and said coldly, Are you sure you're not joking? Previously in the drifting snow city, he had just had a conflict with Fang Jinwu's disciples, Ren Qianli and Chen Jinting. And now Bai Wuji said that the cultivation art was in their hands. No matter how he looked at it, it seemed like Bai Wuji was trying to incite him to act against Fang Jinwu, plotting to kill each other. In fact, Bai Wuji had this reason. Chu Xiu had something on him. If Chu Xiu were to reveal the matter of Bai Wuji to Bai Hantian, he would definitely die a horrible death. He believed that his father, who had a heart of stone, would kill him in the name of justice. Feeling the coldness, Bai Wuji shuddered. In fact, what Bai Wuji said to Chu Xiu at the dinner table was to ask for help from Chu Xiu, but in fact, it was from the bottom of his heart. He and Chu Xiu were people from two different worlds. To be born in the same era as a genius like Chu Xiu was a tragedy, but it was also a blessing. Facing such a person, one could either fight him to the end just like Shen Bai, or admit defeat and no longer be his enemy. Shen Bai had chosen the former, so he was already dead. Bai Wuji knew that he wasn't as strong as Shen Bai, so he had already chosen the latter. Brother Chu. Official Chu is wise. How could I lie to you at this time? Bai Wuji quickly explained, it's true. Fang Jinwu and my ancestor. Fang Jinwu and my ancestor were close friends, so Chen Jinting and I know each other very well. This person had great ambitions but little talent. Especially after drinking too much, he couldn't control his mouth. Previously, when we were drinking, I heard him mention that a small clan in the south of Yen Kingdom had opened a secret box. That secret box contained one of the great sorrowful poems of Yin and Yang. Chen Jinting had taken a fancy to this item and had even fought over it with the members of the Divine Force sect. However, in the end, Chen Jinting had mentioned Fang Jinwu, who was behind him. Even Yen Huainan didn't dare to offend him, so Chen Jinting gave it to Chen Jinting. This wasn't the first time Chen Jinting had bragged about it, saying that even the faction masters of the 7 sects and 8 factions had to concede in front of him. Official Chu, if you don't believe me, you can go to the south of Yen Kingdom and inquire about it. That small clan is still there. Hearing Bai Wuji's assurance, Chu Xiu started to believe him. However, he was still puzzled. If that's the case, why didn't Chen Jinting mention that he knew the great sorrowful poems of Yin and Yang? He didn't even use it. Chu Xiu wanted to gather the sorrowful poem of Yin and Yang of the heavens and earth, but it was not a matter of a day or two. Thus, he had already sent people to inquire about some matters regarding the sorrowful poem. In the end, he came up empty-handed. There was no news of Chen Jinting at all. Bai Wuji said, it was his teacher who forbade him to cultivate it. Although Fang Jinwu's lineage is a rogue cultivator, the martial art inherited by his lineage isn't from the demonic path. Fang Jinwu believes that Chen Jinting's cultivation of this demonic art is harmful to the harmony of the heavens, and may even cause the energy in his body to clash. Therefore he forbade Chen Jinting from cultivating it. Hearing this, Chu Xiu and Mei Qinglian's expressions turned ugly. This Fang Jinwu is really arrogant, to think that he would despise a demonic art like the great sorrowful poems. Does it mean that in his mind, cultivating demonic arts is inferior to others? Who is he looking down on? Seeing that Bai Wuji didn't look like he was lying, Chu Xiu nodded and waved his hand. Alright, you can go back. Bai Wuji finally let out a sigh of relief. But the moment he turned around, Chu Xiu's voice came from behind him. If there's anything, I will have someone contact you in secret. Hearing this, Bai Wuji's body stiffened. He turned around and said with an angry expression on his face, What else do you want? Haven't I already told you the whereabouts of the great sorrowful poems? Chu Xiu's face was filled with a faint smile. Today I saved your future. If I didn't help you, I'm afraid your fate would be the same as the previous generations of Drifting Snow City's disciples. Even if you don't die, you will still be crippled. Are you willing to become a cripple? Such a big favor, do you really think you can repay it with the whereabouts of the great sorrowful poems? Bai Wuji clenched his fist, suppressing his anger. He wanted to scold Chu Xiu for not keeping his word, but he didn't dare to. Then how long do I have to repay it? For the rest of your life. Chu Xiu's face carried a trace of a mocking smile. Of course, if one day I die or if you think that you are stronger than me, then you don't have to repay this favor. Bai Wuji's face turned red, but in the end he released his fists and turned around to leave. He thought that he had broken free from his fate and didn't need to use his own blood as fuel. Who would have thought that just as he left the tiger's cave, he would fall into the wolf's lair? It wasn't that Bai Wuji didn't have confidence, but based on his current state, even if he cultivated for the rest of his life, he wouldn't be able to catch up to Chu Xiu. Hence, he could only hope that Chu Xiu would die as soon as possible. But the problem was, this was also unreliable. Good people don't live long while scourges live for 1,000 years. Chu Xiu was a devil that had killed countless people, and was even crazily courting death. But in the end his strength grew stronger and stronger. It wouldn't be so easy to kill him. Looking at Bai Wuji's back, Mei Qinglian sighed, "You are truly ruthless. That brat would surely have a shadow in his heart if he sees you in the future. But aren't you afraid that he would be forced into a life-and-death struggle with you?" Chu Xiu shook his head. "Can a little loach be considered a fish? Furthermore, I am helping him. It is still unknown if the far north's drifting snow city will still exist. If he stands on my side, I can at least protect his life. In fact, if the far north's drifting snow city didn't offend so many people in the past, with their current strength and foundation, they wouldn't have to worry about being annihilated. Just like the Azure Watersword sect, Lu Gongyuan hadn't made a move for many years, but he was still able to suppress the Azure Watersword sect. As long as he didn't die, the Azure Watersword sect wouldn't be erased. The Bai brothers, Bai Hantian and Bai Hanfeng, were both in the prime of their lives, and their condition was much better than Lu Gongyuan's. It wasn't a problem for them to ensure the far north's drifting snow city's peace. But now that the far north's drifting snow city actually thought of such a method to deceive everyone, it would definitely cause them to offend a large number of people. In addition to their previous enemies, it was unknown if the far north's drifting snow city could survive this period of time. During this period of time, the pugilistic world was in turmoil. Even if the opposition was a major faction that was above the pugilistic world's songs, they would still die if they deserved to. For example, the Divine Martial Sect, the Giant Spirit Gang, the Highland Dong Clan, and the Azure Watersword Sect. Why were all these sects that were annihilated related to him? Chu Xiu shook his head and suddenly said, "That's right, if I were to go to the empty valley now and take out some sincerity to trade for the heaven-extinguishing Great Soul Search Hand, would Fang Jingwu agree?" Mei Qinglian raised her brows and said, "You just scolded his disciple to such a state, and now you immediately go to him to show your sincerity? Are you trying to give him a sweet date to eat? Do you think a true fire spirit refinement realm expert is easy to deal with, or do you think Fang Jingwu's temper is so good?" Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Pang Hu, but Pang Hu just scratched his chin and said, "I don't know what Fang Jingwu is thinking, but if it was me, I would take out a knife and stab him first." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Forget it, let's go back first and think about it." After returning to Yanjing City, Xiang Long sent someone to look for Chu Xiu and ask how the matter was going. Chu Xiu didn't say much, he just told Xiang Long what happened and asked him to go to the Northern Lands garrison. Of course, he didn't mention the matter of Bai Wuji. After receiving Chu Xiu's message, Xiang Long didn't know how to react. He didn't know if Chu Xiu had completed his decree or not. If he said yes, he only asked Chu Xiu to go to the northern drifting snow city to discuss. It would be best if the drifting snow city agreed to the imperial court's garrison in the northern Yen territory without taking any action. But now the drifting snow city didn't agree. It was just that the drifting snow city couldn't take care of itself, so it didn't matter whether he agreed or not. Therefore the imperial court could directly station troops in the northern lands. The drifting snow city wouldn't care, and they didn't have the mood to care. Therefore this matter was considered completed. Xiang Long was quite straightforward. He liked to look at the results rather than the process. After thinking about it, since Chu Xiu had completed his task perfectly, he asked someone to give some rewards to Chu Xiu. After returning to the Jinwu Hall, Chu Xiu thought about it and decided to test Ren Qianli first. Chu Xiu was a man of courtesy before resorting to force. Moreover, Ren Qianli was the general of the 5th Army of the Northern Yen Kingdom. Looking at his style of doing things, he was still somewhat rational. He shouldn't be affected by the emotions of the outside world and directly fall out with someone. Therefore, Chu Xiu went straight to Xiang Wu and asked him to be the middleman to invite Ren Qianli out for a meal. Xiang Wusuan was the youngest among the 5 armies, but he wasn't the weakest. Most importantly, he was labeled as a member of the Northern Yen royal family. Therefore when he asked, Ren Qianli easily agreed. Chapter 724. As the capital city of Northern Yen, Yanjing City definitely had a lot of restaurants that were presentable. Chu Xiu didn't know much about these things, but Xiang Wu did. After all, to him eating was one of his few hobbies. At this moment, in the #1 private room of Flying Phoenix restaurant, Xiang Wu sat in the middle while Chu Xiu and Ren Qianli sat on either side of him. The atmosphere was a little awkward. Ren Qianli frowned and Chu Xiu wouldn't apologize humbly, so it was more like a meeting between enemies. Xiang Wu laughed and said, "I say both of you eat when you should. This restaurant's specialty is fried bananas. It was created by their chef under my inspiration. It became popular in Yanjing City in a short period of time." Chu Xiu glanced at the black thing on the plate. It was really affecting his appetite. If the chef of Flying Phoenix restaurant could only create this thing, he would have been chased away by the shopkeeper. It was more likely that this thing was created under Ren Qianli's coercion. Chu Xiu knocked on the table with his fingers and said, "General Ren, you and I do have some grudges in the northern fluttering snow city, that's true. But grudges don't affect interests. This time I'm here to discuss a deal with you. After all, no one will go against interests." When Ren Qianli heard this, he turned around and asked in astonishment, "Deal? What deal?" He guessed that Chu Xiu wouldn't admit defeat so easily, but he didn't expect Chu Xiu to talk about a deal with him. Chu Xiu coughed and said, "I heard that your lineage accidentally discovered a part of the yin and yang sorrowful poem. You also know that I have several kinds of sorrowful poems on me, so I want to collect them all. For this, I am willing to take out the same level of martial arts in exchange and add some elixirs and other things produced by the Jinwu Hall." After hearing Chu Xiu's words, Ren Qianli's eyes immediately flashed with astonishment. Many people in the pugilistic world knew about the Great Compassion poem. However, although a single Great Compassion poem was very strong, it was not strong enough to surpass the 9 transformations. Therefore, for so many years in the Jianghu, there were many martial artists who wanted to collect the Great Compassion poem. He did not expect Chu Xiu to have such ambition. However, be it Xiang Wu or Ren Qianli, neither of them believed that Chu Xiu would be able to gather all of the yin and yang sorrowful poems. After all, it had been so many years and no one in Jianghu had been able to do it. According to legend, some people could gather up to 6 of the sorrowful poems, but there was still one that they could not find. As far as they knew, although Chu Xiu had a lot of martial arts of the Great Compassion poem of heaven and earth intersecting yin and yang, he still needed a few more to complete it. He was still far from completion. In fact, this was also something that Chu Xiu had unintentionally hidden. His great primordial chaos technique of heaven and earth and the great acupoint shifting technique of heaven and earth were internal martial arts. Even if Chu Xiu displayed them in public, very few people would be able to see through them. No one expected that Chu Xiu had actually collected the last part of the Great Compassion poem without making a sound. Previously in the conflict in the northern fluttering snow city, both parties did not really fight, so this conflict could be resolved. Ren Qianli immediately said, "You said that you are willing to exchange martial arts of equal value? Alright, I don't want anything else. I heard that you have the secret 9 words formula of the Tantric Buddhism sect, as well as the divine martial arts passed down from Master Tam Yuan, the great sun-changing technique and the colorless sealing palm. I just want these 3. The martial artists of Fang Jinwu's lineage did not practice pure Buddhist martial arts, but they were somewhat related to Buddhist martial arts. Therefore, among the martial artists of the northern Yen world, Fang Jinwu was closest to Buddhist martial arts. Everyone in the pugilistic world knew that Chu Xiu practiced martial arts, Taoism, Buddhism and demonic martial arts. It was just that no monk had come to make a fuss about Chu Xiu handing over his Buddhist martial arts. Of course, this was not because those monks were reasonable, but because there was no need. The Buddhist sects in the world were led by the Zen sects, and they naturally looked down on the 9 words formula of the Tantric Buddhism sect. There was also the great sun-changing technique and the colorless sealing palm. Although these 2 martial arts were from the Zen sects, they were passed down from Master Tam Yuan. With Master Tam Yuan's reputation, even if everyone knew that he had found the wrong successor and had actually passed down his legacy to a devil like Chu Xiu, no one could use the excuse of martial arts sects to take away this legacy. The Buddhist martial arts that Chu Xiu practiced had been proven in countless battles, and its power could be said to be incomparably strong. If Fang Jinwu could inherit these 3 martial arts from Chu Xiu, the strength of the lineage of Fang Jinwu's lineage would definitely increase by leaps and bounds. At this moment, Chu Xiu sneered and said, "General Ren, aren't you too optimistic? Don't you know the level of these 3 martial arts? I'm talking about exchanging them to the same level as the Great Compassion poem in your hands. Are you treating the martial arts in your hands as the complete version of the Great Compassion poem?" Ren Qinli said faintly, "Official Chu, you are wrong. Not a single one of the great compassion poems can be missing, and there is no difference between 6 and 5. Since you want to make a deal, you definitely have to use the value of the entire great compassion poem to evaluate it. Am I wrong to say so?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "I came here with sincerity, but it seems like General Ren is not sincere at all." Ren Qinli fiddled with the teacup in his hand and said faintly, "Official Chu, I will also tell you the truth. The great compassion poem is not in my hands now, but in the hands of my master. Qin Jinting is my master's last disciple. Previously you taught Qin Jinting a lesson in front of everyone. Even though you are of the same generation and age as Qin Jinting, your strength is sufficient to be his senior. Therefore, I didn't find trouble with you after that. However, Master, on the other hand, is very displeased with you. You should know that he is already old and doesn't care much about things like power and influence anymore. On the contrary, he values his reputation more than anyone else. If you were to teach your junior brother a lesson, you would be disgracing Master. If you could go to Empty Valley and kowtow to Master in front of everyone, admitting defeat and giving in to Master, then perhaps Master wouldn't even need to exchange anything for the great compassion poem. Master would just give it to you. But on the other hand, if you don't want to give Master face, then take out the few Buddhist techniques you have and I will go to Master myself. Whether it is persuasion or deception, I will definitely be able to get the techniques for you in the end." After he finished speaking, Ren Qinli leisurely drank a mouthful of wine with a fearless look on his face. In fact, he wasn't deliberately humiliating Chu Xiu. In fact, he hoped that Chu Xiu would choose the latter option. That way he would be able to obtain a few powerful Buddhist techniques. After the incident at the Fluttering Snow City, Fang Jinwu was indeed unbearably angry. In terms of status in Jianghu, Fang Jinwu was definitely one of the oldest people in the northern Yan. He was of the same generation as the ancestor of the Fluttering Snow City. In addition, he was a rogue cultivator and didn't have any demonic identity. Therefore, the northern Yan martial arts community gave him face. Even the first seat of the Great Guangming Temple was the same. Of course, the first seat of the Great Guangming Temple referred to the 6 great martial academies and not the 3 great Zen halls. Just like what Ren Qinli said, the old man was already so old. He wasn't as greedy for life as the ancestor of the Fluttering Snow City. He didn't care about power, fame, and even further strength. The only thing he cared about was his own reputation. This time, Chu Xiu humiliated Qin Jinting in public. This matter wasn't big or small, but it really made Fang Jinwu very angry. And Fang Jinwu wasn't so old and muddle-headed as to find trouble with Chu Xiu over such a trivial matter. Therefore, he had originally planned to let it go. But now, if Chu Xiu took the initiative to come to him, it would be strange if Fang Jinwu didn't treat him nicely. Chu Xiu revealed a mysterious smile on his face. Although there was a smile on his face, there was a hint of coldness in his eyes. That is to say, there's no room for negotiation? A person's way of thinking would change according to their status, just like how Chu Xiu was now. If he was weak in the past, it wouldn't be a big deal for him to kowtow and apologize for a technique like the Great Compassion Poem. Kneeling could be exchanged for a peerless technique. There were countless people in Jianghu who wanted to kneel. It was said that a man's knees were worth gold. There were countless people in Jianghu who dared to say this. But when it came to the crucial moment, one still had to kneel. Gold wasn't as important as one's life or future. But now, Chu Xiu wasn't the Chu Xiu of the past. In the younger generation of Jianghu, he and Zhang Qingjun were outstanding people who far surpassed their peers. Along the way there were countless martial arts masters who died in the hands of Chu Xiu. To put it in an arrogant way, he was also someone who could stir up a storm with one hand. Therefore, even though he knew that he could get what he wanted by kneeling, Chu Xiu didn't want to kneel. Seeing that the atmosphere between the two parties was getting tenser, Xiang Wu, who had been engrossed in eating bananas, raised his head and said to Ren Qinli, "I say, old Ren, let's each take a step back. Change the conditions to something less harsh and give me some face." Ren Qinli stood up and said faintly, "Marquis, I've already given you face. Otherwise, I wouldn't have appeared here today. However, I really couldn't change the conditions. Master was currently in a fit of anger. Without absolute benefits, I didn't dare to go to Master's place and say those useless things. Official Chu is stubborn and unwilling to give in. If he isn't willing to pay the price, then there's nothing I can do." With that, Ren Qinli turned and left. Anyway, now that Chu Xiu had something to ask of him, he had nothing to fear. Xiang Wu spread his hands at Chu Xiu and said, "You saw it. Don't blame me for not doing my best. It's just that my reputation isn't that useful." As the great general of the 5 armies, Xiang Wu didn't have a good relationship with the other great generals. After all, he was a member of the Northern Yan royal family, and there was a barrier between him and the others. He really wanted to help Chu Xiu to the best of his ability, but it was a pity that this matter was beyond his ability. Chapter 725. Xiang Wu's relationship with Chu Xiu was not bad, but it was limited to helping Chu Xiu to the best of his ability, just like now. Chu Xiu's status and the friendship between them were not good enough for Xiang Wu to help him with all his might. "I'll have to trouble Marquis this time. I'll settle this myself," Chu Xiu said in a low voice. Xiang Wu suddenly poked his head over and said in a low voice, "I say, are you really going to provoke Fang Jinwu's people? I advise you to calm down. Putting aside Fang Jinwu's strength, as the saying goes, one can be strong without desire. He is an old man who is about to be buried and does not stand on any side, so he is not willing to offend anyone. Even His Majesty is not willing to offend this kind of unaffiliated cultivator who has no power and is not an enemy of the imperial court, for fear that he will be forced to rebel. I can give you an idea, and that is to endure. Endure until Fang Jinwu dies of exhaustion. That old man does not have many days left to live, and it is impossible for him to advance in this lifetime. Therefore, with your lifespan, it will be easy for you to endure until he dies. When Fang Jinwu is dead, Ren Qinli probably won't be a match for you. As for Qin Jinting, he has great ambitions but little talent. His talent can only be considered decent and is far from being comparable to those on the Longhu list. When that time comes, you can simply snatch the Great Compassion poem in any way you want. There is no need to rush." In all fairness, what Xiang Long said was indeed a good idea. What was Chu Xiu's advantage? His youth. Therefore, if Chu Xiu wanted to endure, he could theoretically outlast all his enemies. However, 10,000 years was too long, and Chu Xiu would rather seize every moment. Relying on the power of time to kill an opponent was not his style. Standing up, Chu Xiu smiled and said, "To stand out in the Jianghu, it is not to snatch but to fight. This style does not suit me." After that, Chu Xiu turned around and left. Xiang Wu shrugged. Anyway, he had said what he needed to say. Next, he just needed to watch the show. Looking at the leftover dishes on his table, Xiang Wu shouted, "Manager, give me another plate of fried bananas." Back in the Zhenwu Hall, Chu Xiu immediately asked his men to secretly contact Bai Wuji. Among Chu Xiu's subordinates, there were some who came from the Yinma clan. Some of them were not only good at martial arts but also knew all kinds of things. It should be easy for them to pass the message to Bai Wuji and avoid the eyes of Bai Han Tian and Bai Han Feng. A few days later, Bai Wuji was waiting for Chu Xiu in a private room of the Flying Phoenix Pavilion in Yanjin City. Of course, he was not willing to come, but Chu Xiu had something on him. If he did not come, he could not imagine what would happen to him. Pushing the door and entering, Chu Xiu said in surprise, "Oh, you did not hide your appearance and came here?" Bai Wuji shook his head with a bitter smile and said, "There is nothing to hide. At the moment, the northern floating snow city is too busy to take care of itself. There are countless people coming to cause trouble. There is no one to care about us, the younger generation of martial artists. Going out will be a disaster." Chu Xiu sat in front of Bai Wuji and said, "All right, I'll cut to the chase. I'm only here to tell you one thing." "What is it?" At this time, Bai Wuji had completely given up struggling. Since he had decided to follow Chu Xiu, there was no need to resist in the dark. Otherwise he would die more miserably. Chu Xiu did not directly say it, he just asked, "Last time didn't you say that you have a good relationship with Qin Jinting? Now tell me, what kind of person is this Qin Jinting?" Bai Wuji thought for a moment and said, "Speaking of martial arts talent, this person is not too good, but he is not too bad either. At least, it is not easy to find someone like him among the rogue cultivators, otherwise Fang Jinwu would not have accepted him as a disciple." Aristocratic families relied on bloodline inheritance, and the elders were all strong, so most of their children's talent was not too bad. Sects, on the other hand, relied on their reputation to pass down their inheritance. The greater their reputation, the larger the territory they controlled, the more people they could influence and the more people who would take the initiative to come to learn from them. Therefore they could give them more leeway to choose. For a rogue cultivator like Fang Jinwu, although he was strong, it was not as convenient to accept disciples as a small sect. Therefore, in the case of limited resources, Fang Jinwu being able to accept a disciple with Qin Jinting's talent was already very good. Bai Wuji continued, "Excluding his talent, there is nothing much to say about this person. He is a scheming person, but in fact he is brainless, simple and violent. He seems to be tolerant, but in fact he is easily influenced by his own emotions. On the surface he is humble, but in fact he is arrogant, thinking that it is extraordinary to be accepted as a disciple by Fang Jinwu. This guy is not very likable. Usually we hang out with him, but for the sake of his master we don't want to become enemies with him, but in the end he just wants to get close to us. Chu Xiu nodded. If this was the case, then it would be much easier to deal with. Therefore Chu Xiu waved his hand, whispered a few words to Bai Wuji and then left. A few days later, in Yanjing City, Bai Wuji, Chen Jinting, and some young cultivators from the northern Yan land gathered in Flying Phoenix House to drink. This time it was Bai Wuji's treat. At present he was the strongest among the young people, and also had the most powerful background, so when he invited them no one refused. Moreover, those who came had some sympathy for Bai Wuji. Someone patted Bai Wuji's shoulder and said, "Brother Bai, it's all in the past, don't let it go." After the matter of the northern floating snow city spread out, everyone knew the truth. What happened to the previous generations of floating snow city disciples, naturally couldn't be hidden from them. If it wasn't for Chu Xiu intervening and revealing the truth, Bai Wuji would have become a cripple now. The other disciples were also from big sects, and for someone who had to sacrifice himself for the benefit of his family or sect, they all felt sympathetic, so they didn't take pleasure in Bai Wuji's misfortune. Instead they comforted him. Bai Wuji smiled bitterly and shook his head. "Thank you for your kindness, but it's all in the past, there is no need to mention it again." After saying that, Bai Wuji began to change the topic. But as the conversation went on, the topic shifted to Chu Xiu and the imperial court, causing Chen Jinting's face to turn red. Half of it was because he drank too much and the other half was because he was enraged. Right now, if we were to talk about the elites of the younger generation, then it would definitely be Zhang Qingzhen of Longhu Mountain and Chu Xiu of the Hidden Devil faction. Right now, there are even people in the pugilistic world who call the two of them the righteous celestial master Devil Chu Xiu. Both the righteous and evil factions are unparalleled. Tiske, it's also fortunate that our righteous faction has the little celestial master, or else we would be defeated by the devil faction. Hearing people praising Chu Xiu, Chen Jinting's face turned redder and redder, hiding his anger. Last time in the northern floating snow city, he was humiliated by Chu Xiu in such a manner, it was simply too humiliating. After returning to the empty valley, he wanted to ask his master to avenge him, but he was taught a lesson by his master again. Fang Jinwu was not a child, he would not fight over such a trivial matter. So from then on, Chen Jinting had been suppressing this anger in his heart. Hearing this, Chen Jinting could no longer hold it in. He snorted coldly and said, "Does Chu Xiu deserve to be compared to the little celestial master? Bah! Who is he? A traitor, a shameless villain. Who doesn't know what Chu Xiu has done all these years? In the past, Chu Xiu was born in the Blue Dragon Society, but he betrayed and joined the Guanzhong torture room. The iron-faced judge of the Guanzhong torture room, Master Guan, was very fond of him, but he secretly joined the Hidden Devil faction and plotted against the Guanzhong torture room. Now he has joined hands with the Imperial Court, established the Martial Suppression Hall, and is willing to be the Imperial Court's dog, stirring up trouble in the entire northern Yan martial world. Such a person is simply a slave to the four families, without the slightest sense of propriety or shame. Does such a person deserve to be compared to the little celestial master? Everyone present was stunned. This person really dared to say such a thing. With Chu Xiu's fierce reputation in the northern Yan martial world, although there were many who wanted to curse him, and even more who cursed him in secret, there were not many who would do this in public. Bai Wuji was also stunned. Although he had deliberately led Chen Jinting on, he did not expect Chen Jinting to be so ruthless. This was simply a huge offense against Chu Xiu. But Bai Wuji immediately reacted and said, "Brother Chen, you have drunk too much. This is Yanjing City, the territory of Chu Xiu and the Imperial Court. Don't talk nonsense." Chen Jinting sneered and said, "The Imperial Court's territory? Chu Xiu's territory? What a joke. The world belongs to the people of the world. Since when did it become the Imperial Court and Chu Xiu's?" If Chen Jinting's words were heard in other places, it would be a little bit pretentious and heroic. But at this time, it made people feel that he was going further and further down the road of death. At this moment, the door suddenly burst open, and a young martial artist walked in with a group of people. He said angrily, "How dare you? Chen Jinting, how dare you insult official Chu like this?" This young martial artist had the strength of the internal strength realm, and he was accompanied by some martial artists who were not strong. Seeing this young man, Chen Jinting sneered and said, "I was wondering who it was. So it's Shen Mingyang, a guy who is willing to be someone's dog. Your father betrayed his brother and became a dog for Chu Xiu in order to seek a future and power. Now you are also shameless to be a dog. It's simply a disgrace. This Xin Mingyang was the son of Xin Feiying from the Giant Spirit Gang. He was also acquainted with Qin Jinting and the others. At this time, it was unknown whether he had drunk too much or he really did not put Xin Mingyang in his eyes, but he scolded him ruthlessly. Xin Mingyang sneered and said, "I am a dog for Official Chu. At least I have the confidence to live, unlike you. Last time, Official Chu pointed at your nose and scolded you in the far north floating snow city. Did you dare to say half a word? Now you only dare to secretly slander Official Chu here. Aren't you worse than a dog?" Qin Jinting was provoked and his anger surged. He directly cursed, his hand formed a fist seal, and directly punched at Xin Changming. The moment he attacked, Bai Wuji, who was closest to him, could have stopped him, but he did not move. Instead, an undetectable smile appeared at the corner of his mouth. Chapter 726. Qin Jinting's strength was much stronger than Xin Zhangming. Under his punch, Xin Zhangming tried his best to defend, but he still vomited blood and smashed the door behind him. Xin Zhangming gritted his teeth and stood up. Official Chu would compensate him 10 times or even 100 times in the future. Just as Qin Jinting was about to make a move, Tang Ye's figure suddenly appeared beside him. A golden dragon tail soul-chasing dart was gently pressed against Qin Jinting's neck. Qin Jinting's body suddenly stiffened and he didn't dare to move. Tang Ye smiled and said, "You had a good time scolding him just now, right? You also had a good time, right? Okay, now come with me to Jinwu Hall. Don't you want to scold Official Chu? Well, I will give you a chance to scold him as you please." Everyone present suddenly felt a chill in their hearts. Once he entered Jinwu Hall, could he still come out? Some of them wanted to dissuade him, but when they saw Tang Ye's smiling but cold murderous gaze, everyone gave up the idea of speaking up for Qin Jinting. This idiot couldn't control his mouth, but they might be able to. Tang Ye said faintly, "Everyone has seen it. It was Qin Jinting who first insulted Official Chu, and then he injured young Master Xin of the Giant Spirit Gang. Jinwu Hall follows the rules, and Official Chu is also reasonable. In this matter we are in the right. No one can say a word of objection." After that, Tang Ye directly took Qin Jinting and left. The people present did not even dare to fart. Everyone looked at each other and turned to leave. Qin Jinting had a backer behind him, and Chu Xiu was also not an easy character to deal with. When these two people fought, they should leave as soon as possible to avoid accidental injury. At this time in Jinwu Hall, Mei Qinglian looked at Chu Xiu sitting there with his eyes squinted, waiting leisurely. She couldn't help but ask, "I say, are you going to exchange Qin Jinting for the Great Compassion poem?" Chu Xiu opened his eyes and said faintly, "No matter what, he is also Fang Jinwu's last disciple. Isn't he worth a demonic skill? There are so many people watching this matter. It was Qin Jinting who acted first and he is in the wrong. What reason do the monks of Great Guangming Temple have to come and complain?" In fact, if Chu Xiu wanted to catch Qin Jinting, as long as he lured him out, he could basically do whatever he wanted. It would be effortless. He had spent so much effort to scheme a small character like Qin Jinting. He just wanted to find a reasonable reason. Qin Jinting. Just like what Tang Ye had said before, Jinwu Hall followed the rules, and Chu Xiu was also reasonable. Right now, the rules and reason were all on his side and no one could say anything wrong. If Fang Jinwu wanted the person, he could either forcefully attack or he could only exchange the person with something. Moreover, Chu Xiu dared to guarantee that Fang Jinwu would not choose to forcefully attack. It was not that Fang Jinwu did not dare, but he was worried about the Northern Yan court. Although Jinwu Hall belonged to Chu Xiu, it also belonged to the court. Jinwu Hall was even built in the center of Yanjing City. If Fang Jinwu dared to make a move in Jinwu Hall, it would not only be looking down on Chu Xiu, but also provoking the Northern Yan court. Mei Qinglian nodded and said, "If you just want to exchange for a demonic skill, then Fang Jinwu should agree. However, you know how difficult it is to deal with a powerhouse in the true fire spirit refinement state, especially Fang Jinwu's current state. You forced Fang Jinwu to take out the Great Compassion poem, but you have to be careful of his revenge in the future. After all, one can be strong without desire. Few people in Jianghu are willing to provoke a martial artist at Fang Jinwu's age and state. Fang Jinwu was not young anymore. If he wanted to go one step further in the true fire spirit refinement state, he would almost be a legend in Jianghu, a supreme martial artist. Therefore at this stage Fang Jinwu really did not care about anything. If he was really provoked, it was possible that he would do something that would result in a life-and-death struggle. A cold light flashed in Chu Xiu's eyes and said, "Can't provoke? If you can't provoke the living, can't you afford to provoke the dead?" Mei Qinglian was shocked, but before she could ask, Tanya had already brought Qin Jinting over. Back in the northern fluttering snow city, Qin Jinting was very confident because he had Ren Qinli by his side. He dared not to be convinced when facing Chu Xiu. But now he was alone with Chu Xiu. Feeling the cold murderous intent around him and the mocking eyes of Tanya and the others, Qin Jinting's hands trembled. He forced himself to say, "Chu Xiu, what are you doing? You know who my master is. If something happens to me here, my master and my senior brother won't let you off." Chu Xiu walked forward step by step with a calm and indifferent look in his eyes. He looked at Qin Jinting as if he was looking at a piece of merchandise or an object. Hee. With two chuckles, Chu Xiu stretched out his hand and touched Qin Jinting's head. He did not use much strength. It was just an action of sizing him up, but it scared Qin Jinting so much that he broke down. "Don't kill me. I was wrong, Official Chu, I was really wrong. I was blinded by lard to say those words. Please let me go this time. I will give you whatever you want." Looking at Qin Jinting, who had a face full of fear and tears, Mei Qinglian said in surprise, "Is this guy really Fang Jinwu's last disciple? Even if that old man is blind, he wouldn't accept a guy like this as his last disciple, right?" Chu Xiu said calmly, "Fang Jinwu is a rogue cultivator. It's normal. Not everyone is good at reading people. Moreover, this guy is not like this in front of Fang Jinwu. In his heart, his biggest backer is Fang Jinwu. Therefore, when he is in front of Fang Jinwu, he shows an extremely confident attitude. But in front of me, his backer is too far away. At this moment, he reveals his true nature and heart. This proves that the wind-sweeping tower's Longhu leaderboard is somewhat reliable. At least they didn't put such a person on the leaderboard. Among the wind-sweeping tower's Longhu leaderboard, the Longhu leaderboard was the most unreliable. Some people entered the leaderboard through favors. But in reality, excluding those who entered the leaderboard through favors, the rest of the leaderboard were very reliable. For example, the Longhu leaderboard did not only look at strength but also ability. Even if you had the strength of the unity of heaven and man realm at the age of 18, you would not be able to enter the Longhu leaderboard if you didn't even fight once and did nothing big. On the contrary, if someone was famous in the Xiantian realm, the Longhu leaderboard would also accept you. With Qin Jinting's background, the wind-sweeping towers branch in the northern Yen land should have taken notice of him. But in the end, there was no sign of him on the Longhu leaderboard. At this moment, Pang Hu also walked over unsteadily. Seeing Qin Jinting's appearance, he could not help but sneer. Previously in the drifting snow city in the extreme north, wasn't this guy very strong-willed? Why is he afraid now? Ah, so he's also a spear that looks like it's made of wax. But this guy is actually worth the heaven and earth yin-yang sorrowful poem. It's not easy. Qin Jinting immediately heaved a sigh of relief when he heard this. If Chu Xiu was only here for the great compassion poem, then he still had a chance to live. He was afraid that Chu Xiu wanted to kill him because of his insults. But before Qin Jinting could even let out a sigh of relief, Chu Xiu suddenly reached out and grabbed the top of Qin Jinting's head. In an instant, a strong spiritual force exploded and poured into Qin Jinting's mind. Mei Qinglian and Pang Hu were shocked. Didn't Chu Xiu want to use this guy's life to exchange for the great compassion poem? What was he doing now? Was he preparing to kill someone? Don't underestimate him. His value is not only worth the great compassion poem, but also his master's life. As soon as he said that, an endless abyss gathered in Chu Xiu's eyes, pulling Qin Jinting's divine soul to the deepest part of his heart and into the endless darkness. Chu Xiu's spiritual force had always been strong. Although he did not cultivate spiritual force, he dared to say that even if a martial Dao master from the Xiahou clan stood in front of him, Chu Xiu would be able to use his secret spiritual force to fight against him. Previously, when Master Yuan Ji used the divine sacrifice jade to perform the 3 lives illuminating technique on Chu Xiu's spiritual force suddenly increased by a lot. This was also the last thing Chu Xiu discovered. Moreover, Chu Xiu also discovered that his understanding of spiritual force had increased to another level. It was as if he had suddenly understood many truths in a daze, which was very magical. Chu Xiu had also wondered if this had something to do with the phenomenon on his body in Dugu Weiwei, but he could not come to a conclusion in the end. Now Chu Xiu used his epiphany of spiritual force on Qin Jinting. Chu Xiu did not have a complete theory on the cultivation of spiritual force. He just used it wherever he cultivated. At that moment, Chu Xiu was not destroying Qin Jinting's spirit, but he was modifying it. He forcibly created a version of himself in Qin Jinting's spiritual force. He was his soul, his spirit, and a part of him that controlled him. This was not a cultivation method, but a method that Chu Xiu obtained after he had a breakthrough in his spiritual force. He had to be meticulous in order to use it. This was because this was something that Chu Xiu had comprehended in a daze. For the time being, it was considered an epiphany. In any case, it did not have a name. Chu Xiu just casually named it the soul control technique. The control of the soul control technique had to be meticulous. If the other party's spiritual force was too strong, or if they had a strong will, it would lead to a backlash, causing the soul control technique to fail. Of course, this backlash was not against Chu Xiu, but against the person who had been subjected to the soul control technique. The result was that the person's primordial spirit would be torn apart, and they would directly become a living dead. Chu Xiu used the soul control technique on Qin Jinting only because Qin Jinting was trash and had an extremely weak will. Therefore, Chu Xiu's soul control technique would basically not fail or have any side effects. After a while, when Chu Xiu removed his hand from Qin Jinting's head, there was no fear on Qin Jinting's face, only deep reverence. He knelt at Chu Xiu's feet and trembled. It was not fear but extreme reverence. He respected Chu Xiu as a god. Chapter 727. The soul control technique didn't completely turn a person into a puppet, but it left an indelible mark at the bottom of a person's heart. On the other hand, that person still had normal thoughts. As long as Chu Xiu wasn't around, he would look the same as before. Chu Xiu threw a small bottle to Qin Jinting, and Qin Jinting immediately put it away respectfully. "What is this?" Mei Qinglian asked in astonishment. "Gut worm." This bottle of gut worm was the same one that Yan Tingting used to harm him at the Shenwu sect. The one that Chu Xiu swallowed could no longer be used. This bottle of gut worm was found on Yan Tingting when Tanya and the rest were cleaning up the corpses. Although the conditions to use this thing were extremely harsh, it would be very useful once it was used well. When Mei Qinglian saw this, she seemed to know what Chu Xiu was going to do. She couldn't help but be shocked. Chu Xiu's craziness was even greater than before he became a martial arts grandmaster. At this moment, someone outside reported that Ren Qianli had arrived. Chu Xiu smiled and asked Tanya and the rest to take Qin Jinting away before letting Ren Qianli in. Ren Qianli walked in angrily and shouted, "Chu Xiu, what do you mean by this? I didn't agree to trade the Great Compassion poem with you, so you kidnapped my junior. Are you going to fight to the death with me?" Ren Qianli had just rejected Chu Xiu a few days ago, and now Qin Jinting was in trouble. Even an idiot would know that there must be a relationship between them. Chu Xiu said indifferently, "Ren Qianli, you have to be reasonable when you speak. Go out and find out what exactly did that junior brother of yours do to be captured by me? Not only did he humiliate me in public, he even injured the son of Shen Feiying from the Giant Spirit Gang. Don't tell me you don't know about this?" Looking at Ren Qianli, Chu Xiu revealed a trace of coldness on his face and said in a deep voice, "Qin Jinting said that the Giant Spirit Gang is now my dog. What he said is right, but when you beat a dog you have to look at its master. This is Yanjing City, the Yanjing City where my Zhenwu Hall is located. However, he insulted me and beat my dog in my territory. Ren Qianli, does that junior brother of yours think that I have a good temper or that I'm blind and deaf?" When Ren Qianli heard this, he immediately fell silent and no longer had his overbearing manner from before. With so many people watching, it was impossible for him not to know anything about it. To be honest, he was infuriated. Qin Jinting usually looked relatively calm. Why did he do such an impulsive thing this time? This was Yanjing City, yet he had said all this under Chu Xiu's eyes. If this wasn't courting death, then what was? In the past, Qin Jinting often came to Yanjing City. After all, there was his senior brother, who was the great general of the state's 5 armies, as his backer. However, the problem was that Ren Qianli didn't have the final say in this huge Yanjing City. At the thought of this, Ren Qianli couldn't help but soften his tone and said, "Chu Xiu, I know you want the Great Compassion poem. This matter is also Qin Jinting's fault. Let him go, and I'll bring you the Great Compassion poem." Chu Xiu said faintly, "Hand over the money and I'll hand over the goods. If you want him back, give me the Great Compassion poem first." Ren Qianli gritted his teeth and said, "The Great Compassion poem is in the hands of Master. Do you have to lure him out?" Actually, Ren Qianli didn't want to tell Fang Jinwu about this matter. Fang Jinwu's temper wasn't that reasonable. Qin Jinting got into trouble in his territory. If Fang Jinwu knew about this matter, he would definitely say that Ren Qianli didn't take good care of his junior brother and so on. Chu Xiu sneered and said, "When a disciple gets into trouble, shouldn't the master come and get him? Am I wrong to say that?" Ren Qianli looked deeply at Chu Xiu and said, "Chu Xiu, are you really going to blow this matter up? Can't you give me some face?" Chu Xiu said faintly, "I'm in the right in this matter. Why should I be afraid of blowing this matter up? As for face, General Ren, you didn't give me any face at Feifeng restaurant a few days ago." Good. Chu Xiu, you did well." Ren Qianli's face turned extremely gloomy. He flicked his sleeves, turned around and left. However, Chu Xiu had a fearless look on his face. He wasn't afraid of Fang Jinwu coming. He was more afraid that Fang Jinwu wouldn't come. If Fang Jinwu didn't come, how could he continue acting? Ren Qianli walked out of the Jinwu Hall with a black face. He was immediately seen by a group of people and caused an uproar. Yanjing City wasn't big, and the news of Chu Xiu capturing Qin Jinting couldn't be hidden. Qin Jinting was just a small character, but his master had a powerful background. Therefore, everyone was watching to see how Chu Xiu would handle this matter. Finally, Ren Qianli came. Everyone thought that Chu Xiu would definitely give Ren Qianli some face and release Qin Jinting after Ren Qianli paid a price. However, who would have thought that Ren Qianli wouldn't be able to get Qin Jinting back? Since Ren Qianli had failed, it was obvious who would step up next. Over the past few days, Chu Xiu's side did not stop either. Several waves of people came over because of this matter. The first to arrive was actually Xiang Wu. After entering the door, Chu Xiu didn't serve tea for Xiang Wu. Instead, he asked someone to bring him a plate of bananas. He knew that Xiang Wu liked bananas. Xiang Wu held a banana but didn't eat it. He looked at Chu Xiu with a strange look and said, "Brother Chu, aren't you being too ruthless this time? It's just a sorrowful poem. Do you really want to fight to the death with Fang Jinwu's lineage?" Chu Xiu said faintly, "It's not that I want to fight to the death with him, but Qin Jinting has gone too far. He dared to insult me in Yanjing City and even beat my people. What does this mean?" Xiang Wu nodded. To be honest, if he encountered such a thing, he wouldn't be able to tolerate it either. Although Xiang Wu usually didn't look dignified and even a little unruly, in fact, only the West Hill Army had seen this general's angry look. That was truly terrifying. "Marquis, you didn't specially come here to plead on Qin Jinting's behalf, right?" Chu Xiu asked. Xiang Wu waved his hand and said, "I have nothing better to do than to plead on his behalf. My boss asked me to come." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. He knew who Xiang Wu was talking about. There was only one person that Xiang Wu could call his boss, and that was the #1 person in the Northern Yan Army, the general of the Eastern Mountain Army, and an expert in the true fire spirit refinement state, Kwang Tu Beigong Bailey. This person had a great reputation in the Northern Yan Army, but in the eyes of Eastern Qi and the West Chu Imperial Court, this person was as terrifying as a demon. Beigong Bailey was called Kwang Tu, not Kwang Tu. This nickname came from the fact that when Beigong Bailey was leading the army, he was bloodthirsty. He never took any captives, and once he was defeated, he would kill them all. Therefore, when fighting against Beigong Bailey, the enemy would immediately flee if they were at a disadvantage. Because once they lost, only death awaited them. This person's murderous nature was not ordinary, to the extent that even Xiang Long couldn't handle it. Therefore, after the war between the Northern Yan Army and Eastern Qi ended, although Beigong Bailey was still leading the army, he rarely left Yanjing City. Unless there was a big move, the Northern Yan Imperial Court wouldn't release such a killing machine, and only let him guard Yanjing City. "What orders does General Beigong have?" Xiang Wu took a bite of the banana and said, "Boss doesn't like to meddle in other people's business, but his current mission is to guard Yanjing City, and the Jinwu Hall is also in Yanjing City. You've seen the horror of the true fire spirit refinement state, so boss only hopes that you don't fight in Yanjing City. Otherwise, if things get out of hand, he will have to intervene." Chu Xiu nodded and said, "If that's the case, then don't worry, General Beigong. I'm not arrogant enough to fight with an expert of the true fire spirit refinement state. Of course, the premise is that Fang Jinwu doesn't force us." Xiang Wu nodded and said, "It's no big deal. Boss just asked me to inform you as long as you're confident." After saying that, Xiang Wu suddenly looked at the bananas on his table and said, "I say you don't like eating this thing, so I'll take it all away. Don't waste it." Chu Xiu held his head and waved his hand, indicating that Xiang Wu could do as he pleased. Those who could reach a high position were usually very persistent and unwavering. And Xiang Wu's obsession was eating bananas? After Xiang Wu left, another person came to Chu Xiu's side. It was a eunuch from the imperial palace. The old eunuch wore a green robe and his hair was neatly combed. He always had a formal smile on his face. At first glance he looked like a fake person, but it actually gave people a chilling feeling. I'm Zhang Ge. I work in the imperial palace, in charge of the bastards who serve His Majesty. Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows and said, So it's Director Zhang from the imperial palace. My apologies for not recognizing you. The old eunuch in front of him might sound polite, but he was actually a martial arts master. He was also the director of the imperial palace, in charge of all the eunuchs in the imperial palace. However, Chu Xiu had heard that there seemed to be a powerful eunuch in the imperial palace who might have reached the true fire spirit refinement state. He had served several generations of northern Yan emperors. Although he didn't care about other matters, he was the most senior. The expression on Zhang Ji's face did not change. He said, I'm here on His Majesty's order. His Majesty would like to ask official Chu, is the grudge between you and Fang Jinwu really irresolvable? Chu Xiu said lightly, it's not a grudge between me and him. He just wants to make things difficult for me. Chen Jinting insulted me as the imperial court's dog. I'm already the imperial court's dog. Where does he think the imperial court is? This is also an insult to the imperial court. I can't tolerate it. Zhang Ge nodded his head and said, since that's the case, then as long as Darren Chu grasps propriety, everything will be fine. After all, Fang Jinwu is an expert at the true fire spirit refinement realm, and this is still Yanjing City. His Majesty doesn't want to make this matter bigger and cause more trouble. After saying that, Zhang Ge left. Chapter 728. In today's world, when Yi Xiaonan and the other experts on the legendary list stood at the pinnacle of Jianghu and didn't make a move easily, those at the true fire spirit refinement state were already considered experts among experts. The destructive power of a true fire spirit refinement state expert was enormous, especially for someone like Fang Jinwu who had no standpoint. It was precisely because Fang Jinwu had no standpoint that he didn't want to provoke anyone. He was just a rogue cultivator who had no enmity with diabolism and was on good terms with the orthodox martial arts world. Instead, he expressed goodwill in order to get the other party to stand on his side. Therefore, when Chu Xiu was about to go against Fang Jinwu, those who knew about this matter didn't think that Chu Xiu would win and felt that it was unwise for him to do so. However, it was a pity that Chu Xiu still did so, and it was true that Chen Jinting couldn't control his mouth, so no one could say anything. Xiang Long and Beigong Bailey only sent someone over to tell Chu Xiu to be careful and not go overboard. After all, Chu Xiu was on the same side as the imperial court. It was fine if they didn't help, but it would be too much to forcefully undermine him. More than 10 days later, Ren Qinli was waiting at the gate of Yanjing City in a golden robe instead of armor. He was waiting for Fang Jinwu. In armor, Ren Qinli was the general of the Northern Guard Army. Without armor, he was Fang Jinwu's disciple. Ren Qinli was very clear about his identity. An hour later, 3 people walked over from outside the city. Each of them seemed to have shrunk the ground to an inch, and they were extremely fast. They appeared in front of Ren Qinli almost in the blink of an eye. The one in the middle was a serious-looking old man wearing a brocade robe with cloud patterns. His white hair was neatly combed, and he looked like an extremely rigid and serious person. He didn't have any aura on him, but Ren Qinli unconsciously bowed in front of him. Even though he had become the general of the Northern Yan, he still couldn't forget how strict Fang Jinwu was when he was learning martial arts from him. On Fang Jinwu's left was a middle-aged martial Dao master. He was Huangfu Weiming from the Huangfu clan. He was not here to help Fang Jinwu deal with Chu Xiu. Instead, he was here to persuade Chu Xiu. This could also be considered as giving Chu Xiu some pressure so that he would let them go. There were only so many old people in the Northern Yan lands. The old ancestor of the Drifts Now City had lied to them for so many years, but in truth he was already dead. The others who were on good terms with Fang Jinwu were Yan Shi and the Huangfu clan's ancestor. Therefore, Ancestor Huangfu sent Huangfu Weiming to make his stance clear after hearing about this matter. A martial Dao master was more than enough. Fang Jinwu's favor was not enough for Patriarch Huangfu to do it himself. The person next to Fang Jinwu was an old monk with wrinkles all over his face. He wore a slightly worn-out robe. Although he also had the strength of a martial Dao master, his aura had begun to weaken, and one could clearly feel that he was old. This person was Fang Jinwu's good friend, Jing Yuan, the old monk from the Bodhi Yard of the Great Light Temple. He was an expert from the previous generation of the Bodhi Yard. Jing Yuan and Fang Jinwu were actually of the same generation, and he was even younger than Fang Jinwu. However, he was not at the true fire spirit refinement realm, so he looked extremely old, much older than Fang Jinwu. In the Great Light Temple, almost all martial artists who were nearing the end of their lifespans would choose to go into closed-door cultivation. They would only do two things every day. One was to teach some new disciples martial arts, and the other was to recite Buddhist scriptures, compile and train some martial arts. In such a quiet and peaceful atmosphere, the martial Tao masters of the Great Light Temple would usually die of old age. They lived much longer than the martial Tao masters of other sections. Take Jing Yuan for example, his lifespan was close to 300 years old. Although in theory martial Tao masters could live up to 300 years old, most of them had a relapse of old injuries or internal injuries left behind during cultivation, so they lived far less than this number. However, almost half of the martial Tao masters of the Great Light Temple could live to the end of their lifespans. Jing Yuan had not taken a step out of the Great Light Temple for more than 10 years, but since his old friend wanted to invite him this time, Jing Yuan was willing to make an exception for him. However, Jing Yuan did not use his identity as a member of the Great Light Temple to threaten Chu Xiu. He only wanted to be a mediator in the middle to calm both parties down. He knew that Fang Jinwu had a bad temper, and he had also heard that Chu Xiu could be ruthless. Therefore he only wanted to persuade the other party and try his best to prevent Chu Xiu from killing anyone. He did not want his old friend to die before him at a time like this. Greetings, Master Senior Jing Yuan. Brother Huangfu, I didn't expect you to come too. Ren Qianli greeted Fang Jinwu respectfully, but before he could say anything Fang Jinwu snorted, "Trash. You're getting worse and worse as a general. Didn't you tell me before how much power you have in the Northern Yan military? In the end you can't even protect your junior brother. What's the point of being a general?" Ren Qianli's face turned red. He knew that this master of his was never reasonable. However, Ren Qianli could only explain carefully, "Master, it's not that I didn't want to save my junior, but I couldn't save him at that time. Chu Xiu's Jinwu Hall has him, Qilian Village's red-faced heavenly king Pang Hu, and the Shadow Demon sect's saintess, Mei Qinglian. There are 3 martial Tao masters there and I couldn't snatch him away. Moreover, the Jinwu Hall was established by Her Majesty, and its status is not lower than the 5 armies. I couldn't order Chu Xiu either. If things got out of hand, the Northern Yan Imperial Court would kill each other, and Her Majesty wouldn't like it." Fang Jinwu snorted again, "You have so many misgivings. Why don't you follow me back to the empty valley to practice martial arts in seclusion?" Ren Qianli didn't dare to say a word after being rebuked by Fang Jinwu, and he felt even more sullen. Qin Jinting was the one who couldn't control his mouth, so why was Master scolding him? Furthermore, it was impossible for Ren Qianli to return to the empty valley. A man was born to seek fame and fortune. In the Northern Yan Imperial Court, he was the revered general who commanded the Northern Guard Army. He was majestic and insufferably arrogant. Although returning to the empty valley would give him more time to avoid those intrigues and concentrate on martial arts, Ren Qianli was no longer willing to live that kind of life of hardship. Jing Yuan, who was beside him, advised, "Brother Fang, things have already happened. It's useless to reprimand General Ren. Hurry to the Jinwu Hall and bring him back lest something goes wrong." Hearing Jing Yuan's words, Fang Jinwu snorted coldly and said, "Bring me to the Jinwu Hall." Ren Qianli heaved a sigh of relief and immediately led Fang Jinwu and the others to the Jinwu Hall. During this period of time, the matter between Chu Xiu and Fang Jinwu's lineage had caused an uproar. Even if the people in Yanjing City didn't know Fang Jinwu, who else could make a dignified Northern Guard army's Ren Qianli personally lead the way except for Fang Jinwu? The group of people immediately became spirited and followed behind them to the Jinwu Hall. At this time, Chu Xiu, who was in the Jinwu Hall, had also received the news and had been waiting there for a long time. In less than a quarter of an hour, a powerful pressure came from the outside world. The sky was suddenly covered with dark clouds, and there was even a faint roar of thunder. It was incomparably terrifying. Fang Jinwu stood outside the Jinwu Hall with a gloomy face, just like the gloomy sky. The surrounding warriors who had never seen a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse were amazed. The power of a thought could affect the climate of a region. This kind of power was simply magical. Looking at the closed door of the Jinwu Hall, Fang Jinwu's face showed a trace of anger. He was sure that Chu Xiu knew that he was coming, but he didn't even open the door. This kind of indifferent attitude made Fang Jinwu very angry. He took a step forward and invisible waves spread forward, heading straight for the door of the Jinwu Hall. Seeing that the door of the Jinwu Hall was about to be smashed, the door was suddenly opened. A saber light with a soaring demonic aura suddenly fell and completely blocked the wave of waves. Chu Xiu stepped out of the door and sneered, "Senior Fang is so angry. Do you knock on the door like this when you are a guest?" Fang Jingwu said coldly, "Guest? I'm not a nuisance to be a guest. Chu Xiu, you captured my disciple and forced I to come here in person. Do you really think that I's temper is so good?" Chu Xiu said coldly, "Senior Fang, I call you senior because of your age and seniority, but don't go too far. Don't tell me you don't know what your disciple has done? Not only did he humiliate me in public in Yanjing City, but he also injured my men. Do you still care about the law or the rules?" Fang Jinwu's face was cold. "If my disciple has done something wrong, I will be the one to teach him a lesson. You, a junior, actually want me to come personally to ask for him. You're really bold. Let Wei Xia come." Fang Jinwu was actually not angry that Chu Xiu had captured Qin Jinting, but that he was bold enough to ask him to come personally to ask for him. As a martial artist of the older generation, Fang Jinwu's character was actually very rigid. In his opinion, even if Chu Xiu was famous in the underworld, so what? He was still a fledgling junior. In the Yinma clan, only someone like Wei Xia was qualified to be mentioned in the same breath as him. Not to mention Chu Xiu, he didn't even care about Beigong Bailey, the #1 person in the Northern Yen military. The reason was simple. Although Beigong Bailey was strong, he was not old. At least he was a junior when compared to Fang Jinwu. This kind of martial artist who thought that he could look down on everyone because of his seniority was not uncommon in the underworld. After being flattered for a long time, he really thought that everyone had to give him face. Now that Chu Xiu didn't want to give him face, he was naturally angry. Chu Xiu smiled coldly. "I'm bold? It seems that Senior Fang still doesn't understand me. I'm here today to ask you to get him, not to quarrel. Since you don't want to get your disciple, fine, I'll kill him now and let him wait for you down there." Chapter 729. Chu Xiu was very daring and he acted crazily without any scruples. This was something that many people knew. However, everyone was shocked to see Chu Xiu go head-to-head with Fang Jinwu, a veteran true fire refinement realm expert. They thought to themselves that Chu Xiu was indeed very bold. Fang Jinwu was enraged by Chu Xiu. He pointed at Chu Xiu and shouted angrily, "How dare you? Let's see if I dare or not." Chu Xiu also gave tit for tat, not giving in at all. At that moment, the old monk, Jing Yuan, stepped forward. He took a step forward, and his aura accurately landed between Chu Xiu and Fang Jinwu. A gentle Buddhist light radiated from him, causing the tense atmosphere between the two of them to dissipate quite a bit. With Jing Yuan's current strength, he couldn't even defeat Chu Xiu, let alone Fang Jinwu. However, he was able to accurately use a step and a slight force to break the tit-for-tat battle between the two of them. This old monk's attainments in the martial way weren't weak. "There's no need for the two of you to do this. Everything can be discussed, right?" Jing Yuan put his palms together and chanted the name of Buddha. Fang Jinwu gave face to his old friend. He did not say anything but stopped the violent gang qi that was spreading out from his body. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and asked, "A monk from the Great Light Temple? Previously, I had an agreement with Chief Monk Shudu of your Wangyan Zen Hall that I wouldn't make a move. However, the condition is that no one comes to provoke me. I believe that you've seen the whole story. Don't you know who's right and who's wrong? It's said that monks don't lie. Today, Master, why don't you tell us who's right and who's wrong?" Hearing Chu Xiu's question, Jing Yuan was speechless. To be honest, according to the rules, Qin Jinting was indeed in the wrong. With Chu Xiu's personality, it was already surprising that he did not kill Qin Jinting. Jing Yuan could only sigh and say, "Official Chu, you've misunderstood. I'm not here to threaten Official Chu on behalf of the Great Light Temple. I'm only here as a friend to dissuade you. I don't want things to get out of hand. Now that things have come to this, right and wrong are no longer important. Could it be that we have to create a bloody case just for the sake of arguing?" Huangfu Weiming, who was at the side, also said, "Master Jing Yuan is right. Official Chu, one should be lenient whenever possible. It's just a small argument from the younger generation. Official Chu, you've already taught him a lesson. Let Senior Fang take him back and teach him another lesson." With the people from the Huangfu clan and the Great Light Temple coming forward to plead for leniency, the atmosphere seemed to ease up a little, but it was even more solemn than before. From this, it could be seen that Fang Jinwu had not lived for so long in vain. At the very least, the connections he had accumulated were terrifyingly strong. He could easily summon people from the Great Light Temple and the Huangfu clan. Chu Xiu stood with his hands behind his back and said faintly, I don't want things to get out of hand, so I didn't kill Qin Jinting to vent my anger. You can take him away today. Jing Yuan and Huangfu Weiming heaved a sigh of relief. Even Fang Jinwu's tightly knitted eyebrows relaxed a little. It seemed that Chu Xiu was still sensible and wasn't the kind of person who would be stubborn to the end. However, at this moment Ren Qianli lowered his head. He knew that Chu Xiu wouldn't agree so easily. Sure enough, Chu Xiu then said, I can let him go, but you have to give me something in exchange for it. Take it as compensation for Qin Jinting's damage to my reputation. I heard that the great soul-searching hand of extinguishing sky and extinguishing earth, one of the great compassionate poems, is in the hands of Elder Fang. Since you don't like demonic techniques, you can give it to me to cultivate. Fang Jinwu's face immediately turned black when he heard this. He said coldly, what if I don't want to give it to you? To be honest, the great compassionate poems didn't have much of an effect on Fang Jinwu. The techniques that he cultivated were inclined towards the Buddhist lineage. Therefore he had a natural rejection towards demonic techniques. He didn't cultivate them himself and even forbade his disciples from cultivating them. Under normal circumstances, it wouldn't be a big deal for him to take out this technique. However, if he were to take out this technique to trade with Chu Xiu now, he would feel like he was lowering his head. This was something that the prideful Fang Jinwu would never allow. If you don't give it to me, then leave your disciple's life here. Chu Xiu took a step forward, and the aura around him soared into the sky. The demonic aura and murderous intent were one, and it actually stirred up the gloomy sky in midair. The demonic aura was abnormally terrifying. In terms of his aura and control of the power of heaven and earth, Chu Xiu was actually inferior to Fang Jinwu. After all, Fang Jinwu was an expert in the true fire spirit refinement realm. However, Chu Xiu had the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. With the help of the heaven's sun gazing at air technique, the demonic aura found the loophole in Fang Jinwu's aura and finally messed it up. Below, Jing Yuan's face revealed a trace of astonishment. This Chu Xiu was indeed someone who could fight with Chief Shudu. At such a young age, he already had such high attainments in martial arts comprehension. It was really terrifying. Jing Yuan didn't know that Chu Xiu had the heaven's sun gazing at air technique. He thought that Chu Xiu had purely relied on his profound attainments in martial arts to achieve this. It was just like how he had broken the confrontation between Chu Xiu and Fang Jinwu before. He didn't rely on strength, but completely relied on his own martial arts comprehension and experience. However, Jing Yuan then reacted and hurriedly said, Brother Fang, calm down. This is Yanjing City. Fang Jinwu took a deep breath and withdrew his aura. To be honest, if this was not Yanjing City, he was really prepared to fight. The moment he released his aura, he had already felt several auras around Yanjing City staring at him and guarding against him. These were all experts from the Northern Yan Imperial Court. It was precisely because Fang Jinwu had not had any conflicts with the Northern Yan Imperial Court that these experts from the Northern Yan Imperial Court allowed him to act so presumptuously in Yanjing City. Otherwise, he wouldn't even have the chance to enter the city. Huangfu Weiming also whispered to Fang Jinwu, Senior Fang, Chu Xiu's current identity is special. After all, this is Yanjing City. It is not appropriate for you to fight here. Moreover, this person is extremely crazy. If you force him into a corner, I reckon that you won't be able to get your disciple back. Peng Hu and Mei Qinglian are not here. Once they make a move, they will immediately take Qin Jinting's life. Fang Jinwu was silent. After a while, he said coldly, Where is my disciple? Although he had a bad temper, it was not to the extent of being crazy. If he fought in Yanjing City, it was hard to guarantee that the experts from the Northern Yan Imperial Court would not intervene. Moreover, Huangfu Weiming was right. No matter how angry he was, he still had to care about Qin Jinting's life. In fact, Fang Jinwu really cared about this disciple of his. In the eyes of Chu Xiu and the others, Fang Jinwu seemed to have misjudged people and actually accepted a guy like Qin Jinting as a disciple. In fact, when Fang Jinwu accepted Qin Jinting as a disciple, he was not like this. Qin Jinting's background was very similar to Fang Jinwu's. They were both rogue cultivators, but he had great ambitions and struggled endlessly. Even when he was bullied and ridiculed, he still struggled to move forward. When Fang Jinwu saw Qin Jinting, it was as if he saw himself in his younger days. Therefore he accepted him as a disciple. Even on normal days he valued Qin Jinting more than Ren Qianli. However, it was a pity that Qin Jinting had become Fang Jinwu's disciple overnight. Such an identity had already surpassed the level that he had dreamt of reaching. Under this huge surprise he had completely lost himself. He was no longer the Chen Jinting who had strived hard to make a name for himself among the numerous loose cultivators. However, Fang Jinwu did not know about these things. He thought that his disciple had never changed. Hand over the item first, then look at the person. My Jinwu Hall is here and everyone is watching. Are you afraid that I will deceive you? Chu Xiu said faintly. Fang Jinwu snorted coldly and directly through the great soul-searching palm of extinguishing heaven and extinguishing earth to Chu Xiu. Since Fang Jinwu had taken his cultivation method, this enmity was completely formed. Fang Jinwu had never hated someone so much before. Unless Chu Xiu did not leave Yanjing City for the rest of his life, otherwise he would suffer. Chu Xiu reached out and directly took the Great Compassion poem in his hand. He knew that this was definitely the authentic Great Compassion poem before he even looked at it. The reason was very simple. Other things could be imitated, but the peculiar touch of the Great Compassion poem, which was like human skin, and the words that seemed to be written in blood, could tell Chu Xiu that what he had obtained was authentic. Looking at the Great Compassion poem, Chu Xiu's heart was already filled with ecstasy. The Great Compassion poem, this peerless demonic martial art, was finally collected by Chu Xiu. If it was not at this time, he would want to first look at it and cultivate it. However, if he delayed any longer, he was afraid that he would eat Fang Jinwu's eyes. Therefore, Chu Xiu directly waved his hand and asked Pang Hu and Mei Qinglian to bring Chen Jinting out and directly let him go. Chu Xiu said faintly, "Senior Fang, check carefully. Although this guy dared to scold me, he did not suffer any damage at my place." "Master, shut up." Chen Jinting wailed and was about to complain, but he was interrupted by Fang Jinwu. He placed his hand on Chen Jinting's mind and examined him. Whether it was inside or outside of his body, he indeed did not suffer any damage. However, when he looked at Chu Xiu, Chen Jinting's eyes revealed a hint of fear. However, Fang Jinwu did not care. He thought that Chu Xiu had said some harsh words, which caused Chen Jinting to be frightened. Fang Jinwu glanced coldly at Chu Xiu and said coldly, "Don't think that you can be so arrogant just because you have some strength and some backing. Chu Xiu, this time you have taken advantage of me. I will let you go for now. Next time you won't be so lucky." After saying that, Fang Jinwu immediately left with Chen Jinting. He did not notice that Chu Xiu was moving his mouth behind him. That sentence was, "There will be no next time." Chapter 730. Fang Jinwu's expression was extremely gloomy. Chen Jinting only dared to talk to Fang Jinwu after Ren Qianli sent them out of Yanjing City. "Master." However, just as he said those two words, Fang Jinwu directly slapped him. The slap caused blood to flow out of Chen Jinting's mouth, and a look of disbelief appeared in his eyes. In fact, both Ren Qianli and Chen Jinting had been beaten up when they learned martial arts from Fang Jinwu. Fang Jinwu belonged to the old school of martial arts. Not only was his personality stiff, but he was also the same when teaching his disciples. He often beat and scolded them. Although he was diligent, he was also extremely strict. Therefore, Ren Qianli and Chen Jinting were a little afraid of him. However, Fang Jinwu had never been so ruthless in the past. Looking at Chen Jinting, Fang Jinwu said coldly, "This slap is a lesson. I forgot to teach you before. Trouble comes from the mouth. Trouble comes from the mouth." Fang Jinwu didn't care about the Great Sorrow poem. He only cared that he had lost face in front of a junior Chu Xiu, and in front of so many people in the Northern Yan martial arts community. At Fang Jinwu's age, he had either seen through the right and wrong of fame and fortune, or he wanted to achieve something before he died. Fang Jinwu didn't have such great ambitions, but he didn't care about fame and fortune anymore. He only cared about his reputation. Therefore he was so angry this time. He was angry that he had lost face. "Yes, master. I know I was wrong." Chen Jinting covered his face and didn't dare to say a word. Jing Yuan also comforted him, "Brother Fang, let it go. Jinting is just young. When we were young, we were also very impetuous and didn't consider the consequences. If it weren't for the reminder of our masters, we would have also made this or that mistake." Huangfu Weiming also advised, "It's all in the past. Senior Fang, it's useless to be angry. I believe that Jinting has learned his lesson and will repent in the future." The two of them took turns to dissuade him, and Fang Jinwu finally calmed down a little. However, he still pointed at Chen Jinting and yelled, "When we get back to Empty Valley, you will stay in seclusion. You are not allowed to step out of Empty Valley until you reach the unity of heaven and man realm." Chen Jinting hurriedly nodded. His face also revealed an expression of reverence. However, no one noticed that there was a trace of strangeness in his eyes. After teaching the disciple a lesson, Fang Jinwu and the other two went back together. Along the way, when some of the cultivators saw Fang Jinwu's group of three, they were curious. Some of them even had strange looks in their eyes. This made Fang Jinwu even angrier. He thought that these people were cursing him in their hearts. In fact, Fang Jinwu really thought too much. This group of people was purely curious about the martial artist in the true fire spirit refinement realm, as well as the conflict between Chu Xiu and this person. Now that Chu Xiu and the others couldn't see him, they could only watch Fang Jinwu. From Fang Jinwu's point of view, he had already lost face by taking the initiative to switch players. This was a typical mentality of not taking advantage of others or suffering losses. However, in the eyes of most people, Fang Jinwu did not lose face. Qin Jinting had scolded Chu Xiu so harshly. With Chu Xiu's character, it would not be an exaggeration to kill him on the spot. In the end, Qin Jinting only extorted a cultivation technique. This was already giving Fang Jinwu a lot of face, but he felt that he had lost face. The group walked for several days. Master Jing Yuan changed directions and prepared to return to the Great Light Temple. Therefore, Huangfu Weiming took the initiative to invite Master Jing Yuan to a vegetarian meal as a farewell. Although Huangfu Weiming was not the family leader of the Huangfu clan, he was also a very slippery person. He did not know Jing Yuan before this, but after this trip, both parties were considered to have gotten to know each other. It was not a bad idea to have a meal before leaving to network and deepen their relationship. Although Master Jing Yuan did not seem to have much lifespan left, it would not be a loss to maintain a close relationship with a martial Dao Grandmaster. There were no big cities along the way, so Huangfu Weiming found the largest restaurant in the town and invited Master Jing Yuan to a banquet. He even booked the entire floor of the restaurant, which attracted the attention and dissatisfaction of the other martial artists. However, when they saw that it was the Huangfu clan of Western Yen who was inviting the monk of the Great Light Temple, as well as the Northern Yen martial arts legend Fang Jinwu, the others immediately became cautious. They sat downstairs and did not even dare to speak. These people were existences that they could only look up to, especially Fang Jinwu. After not stepping into the Jianghu for such a long time, many people were very curious about why Fang Jinwu had come out this time. After many inquiries, they finally found out what happened in Yanjing City. They could not help but cast curious gazes at Fang Jinwu and the others. Huangfu Weiming poured a glass of wine for Jing Yuan and Fang Jinwu at the same time and said, "Senior Fang, Master Jing Yuan," the patriarch said before he came. "It is not that he does not want to take action this time, but the current situation is a little too sensitive. The righteous and demonic sects are fighting endlessly. Although Xiang Long is old, his ambition has not diminished. After defeating Eastern Qi, he still wants to suppress the Northern Yen martial arts world and leave a peaceful Northern Yen for his son. It can be said that the whole world is in a precarious situation. If you are not careful, you will not even know how you died." Jing Yuan also sighed. These are troubled times. 2 of the first seats of the Temple of Great Lights, 3 major meditation halls and 5 of the 6 major martial academies' first seats have gone. It's been many years since we've mobilized such a large force. Therefore, in the land of Northern Yen, it's not that the Temple of Great Light doesn't want to interfere, but we can't. Huangfu Weiming nodded and said, "Therefore in the beginning the patriarch's intention was for both sides to take a step back. Senior Fang, you can hand over the cultivation method to the Huangfu clan or Master Jing Yuan and be the middleman to exchange for Qin Jinting." However, the patriarch knows Senior Fang's personality, so he did not say anything. He knew that you would definitely come personally. Fang Jinwu snorted coldly and said, "Of course I will come personally. If I don't come personally, how will I know which bold fellow dares to touch my disciple? I will remember this Chu Xiu. I want to see if the Northern Yen Imperial Court and the Hidden Devil lineage can protect him for a lifetime." Jing Yuan and Huangfu Weiming looked at each other and shook their heads helplessly. Fang Jinwu's personality was too stubborn. At his age he did not care about himself anymore. He could do whatever he wanted. Even if the abbot of the Great Light Temple stood in front of him, he would not be able to make him lower his head, let alone a junior like Chu Xiu. However, the problem is even if you do not care, you still have to think about your disciple. In the future when you die, this hatred will not disappear, and it will all be borne by your disciple. At this time Qin Jinting walked up, trembling with fear. He held a plate in his hand, but on it was the rare Northern Yen pine eagle meat. Pine eagle was produced in West Chu, and it would not fall to the ground until it was exhausted. The meat was extremely delicious and Fang Jinwu loved this dish the most. It was not strange to find pine eagle meat in a big city like Yanjing City, but it was not easy to find it in a small town like this. Master, please don't be angry. This time I was rash. I swear, after returning to Empty Valley, I will work hard to cultivate. I will not step out of Empty Valley until I reach the unity of heaven and man realm. Seeing Qin Jinting's expression, Fang Jinwu's anger was greatly reduced. He picked up his chopsticks and was about to eat, but his movements suddenly stopped. A subconscious reaction told him not to touch the plate of meat. Intuition was not only accurate for women, but it was even more accurate for those strong martial artists. These martial artists could communicate with the power of heaven and earth, so they had a trace of the power of heaven and earth. Although they did not know divination techniques, at a critical moment, there would always be a moment of sudden inspiration that could save their lives. Of course, this intuition was not accurate every time. If it was a normal time, Fang Jinwu would have put down his chopsticks, but this pine eagle meat was brought up by Qin Jinting. At this time he was still looking at Fang Jinwu, as if his master would only forgive him if he ate his meat. Fang Jinwu also felt that he was a bit too harsh with his lesson. Seeing Qin Jinting like this, he could not bear it, so he ate a piece of meat. However, he felt that there was something wrong with the taste of the meat. However, Fang Jinwu did not think too much about it. He thought that it was because the chef in this small place was not good enough. Jing Yuan was a monk, so he naturally didn't eat meat. When Huangfu Weiming saw Fang Jinwu pick up his chopsticks first, he also wanted to pick up some pine eagle meat. However, at this moment, Fang Jinwu suddenly dropped his chopsticks and his expression changed. "Senior Fang, what's wrong?" Huangfu Weiming asked curiously. Fang Jinwu abruptly raised his head and looked at Qin Jinting with a puzzled and angry expression on his face. "You poisoned the food?" What? Jing Yuan and Huangfu Weiming were stunned at the same time. Qin Jinting actually poisoned the food. How was this possible? Not to mention that Fang Jinwu only slapped him. Even if he broke one of his legs, Qin Jinting would not do such a thing. Fang Jinwu was his backer, his future. Poisoning Fang Jinwu was the same as poisoning himself. Moreover, there were very few poisons that could kill a true fire spirit refinement realm martial artist. How did Qin Jinting get his hands on it? Qin Jinting's face was pale as he murmured, "I don't know, I really don't know." At that moment, Qin Jinting didn't know what he was doing at all. It was as if there was a voice in his mind telling him that he had to do it, and he acted according to the voice in a daze. He didn't have the slightest ability to think. "Evil disciple. Why did you do this?" Fang Jinwu roared and slapped Qin Jinting away. This slap directly made him spit out blood and all the bones in his body were broken. Fang Jinwu really wanted to kill. He did not expect that the disciple he had always loved and taught with all his heart would want to harm him. "Of course it's because you are not a good master. Father and son kill each other, master and disciple kill each other. TSK, this is a tragedy. I can't bear to look at it." Chapter 731. The moment he saw Chu Xiu, Fang Jinwu understood everything. He was still saying that he would definitely find trouble with Chu Xiu when the opportunity presented itself. Who would have thought that Chu Xiu would be even more ruthless than he was? Chu Xiu had no intention of giving him a chance to return to Empty Valley alive. Fang Jinwu's face was flushed. He forced himself to stand up and said angrily, "What did you do to Golden Court? Did you control him to poison me?" Chu Xiu said lightly, "Your precious disciple has already been crippled by you. Does it matter what I did to him? And I didn't poison you. Do you think I would do something so despicable and shameless? It's just a few small goo worms. Moon-worshipping cult's intestine-severing goo." As soon as he said that, Fang Jinwu, Jing Yuan, and Huangfu Weiming's expressions changed. They knew about moon-worshipping cult's intestine-severing goo. In fact, it was impossible for the intestine-severing goo to kill Fang Jinwu. Although it could kill martial Dao grandmasters, Fang Jinwu was a true fire spirit refinement realm powerhouse. Even if he did not have Chu Xiu's glass golden thread goo, which could suppress the goo worms, he could use his own qi and blood to forcefully expel the goo worms from his body. But now that Chu Xiu was here, would he give him this chance? Several intestine-severing goo had already entered his body, rapidly devouring the qi and blood in his body to strengthen themselves. As they spoke, they had already matured and started to gnaw at Fang Jinwu's meridians. The intense pain was unbearable, worthy of the intestine-severing goo. Huangfu Weiming hurriedly said, "Chu Xiu. What do you mean? The matter has already been resolved, but you're still using such underhanded methods in secret. Do you have any respect for the rules?" Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "What do I mean? I'm cutting the weeds by the roots. Senior Fang is so prideful and I've embarrassed him today. There will definitely be endless trouble in the future. Instead of waiting for the future, it's better to find an opportunity to solve this problem now. Everyone looked at Chu Xiu as if they were looking at a lunatic. Are you sure that's how you use the word, exterminate? A real pellet state martial artist said to a true fire god refinement realm powerhouse that he wanted to eliminate the root of the problem. Why does this sound like a fantasy? But the problem was that Chu Xiu's current appearance showed that he was ready to go all out. Amit Ba. Master Jing Yuan took a step forward and sighed. He put his palms together and said, Official Chu, is there really no room for reconciliation? Master Jing Yuan hadn't expected Chu Xiu to do this. Ruthless, vicious, and decisive. Once enmity was incurred with the other party, it would be a fight to the death. While Fang Jinwu was still thinking of finding trouble with Chu Xiu had already planned to kill him. It had to be said that Fang Jinwu was really old. He was an old man in the pugilistic world, but he had been forced to this extent by the schemes of a junior. Even before the two of them had met, Chu Xiu had already planned to kill him. Master Jing Yuan came from the Great Light Temple. He had followed the monks of the Great Light Temple over the years, and he had also seen the rise and fall of many demonic path powerhouses or some villains in the pugilistic world. Although Chu Xiu was young, he already had the potential to be like these people. In fact, he was even more ruthless than them. It was just that Fang Jinwu was his good friend. With Master Jing Yuan's character, he wouldn't do the kind of thing of running away and watching from the sidelines. Room for reconciliation? Master Jing Yuan, are you kidding me? At this time you want me to stop? Chu Xiu looked at Master Jing Yuan as if he had seen a ghost. Has this old monk been cultivating behind closed doors for too long so he has become naive like this? Chu Xiu had spent so much effort to set up the soul control goo, and he had already offended Fang Jinwu. If he didn't kill Fang Jinwu this time, he would definitely face Fang Jinwu's crazy revenge in the future. Now Master Jing Yuan actually asked him to ease up. It was simply the biggest joke in the world. Great Master Jing Yuan sighed again. Then he suddenly shouted, Brother Fang, don't try to be brave. Run. If Fang Jinwu was at his peak, not to mention that he was no longer young, even if he had declined to the point where he didn't have much life left, Jing Yuan would not worry about him. However, the broken intestine goo had already taken effect. Under the intense pain, there was also the power of the broken intestine goo gnawing at the internal organs. The longer it dragged on, the more dangerous it would be for Fang Jinwu. Therefore, if Fang Jinwu still cared about his face and refused to escape, the consequences would be unpredictable. Jing Yuan was indeed Fang Jinwu's good friend of many years. He knew this old friend very well. Fang Jinwu had indeed planned to fight with Chu Xiu until the end. Even if he had the broken intestine goo, he would kill Chu Xiu first. However, seeing that Jing Yuan still stood up to protect him at this time, Fang Jinwu gritted his teeth and stepped out of the window. His figure had already disappeared from the restaurant. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, The two of you, I'll leave these two to you. As soon as he finished speaking, Chu Xiu's figure moved, and his speed exploded to the extreme. In the blink of an eye, he also chased after them. Pang Hu chuckled and said, You take the old one. It's easy to deal with. I'll take the young one. As soon as he finished speaking, the red long saber in Pang Hu's hand directly slashed at Huangfu Weiming. To be honest, the one who felt the worst at this moment was Huangfu Weiming. Why was his mouth so cheap? Why did he insist on eating? In the end, he ate something wrong. Huangfu Weiming knew that since Qin Jinting was already under Chu Xiu's control, he would find an opportunity to give the goo to Fang Jinwu sooner or later. However, the problem was that he would already be gone by then. Why bother getting involved in this matter? Master Jing Yuan was fighting for his friend. Huangfu Weiming's friendship with Fang Jinwu, or rather the entire Huangfu clan's friendship with Fang Jinwu, was not that close. When they really started fighting, Huangfu Weiming actually wanted to retreat. However, who would have thought that Chu Xiu would directly make him a target? Pang Hu's saber slashed over. Mei Qinglian snorted and said, The old one is not easy to deal with either. Although the great art of the enchanted girl focused on mental attacks, against an old monk like Jing Yuan, who was nearing the end of his lifespan and had seen through too many things, the effect was undoubtedly greatly reduced. However, it did not matter. This time their target was only Fang Jinwu. She was only responsible for stopping them here. The real killer was Chu Xiu. All the martial artists in the town were dumbfounded. Chasing was very common in the underworld, but it was not common for a real pellet state martial artist to chase a true fire spirit refinement state martial artist. They had never even heard of it. As a true fire spirit refinement state powerhouse, Fang Jinwu's speed was naturally not slow. However, Chu Xiu also had the inner binding seal of the fast and slow 9-word secrets. He walked horizontally and vertically, and his speed also burst to the extreme. He followed closely behind Fang Jinwu. His mental power condensed into an arrow, and the soul-destroying arrow condensed in Chu Xiu's hand. The powerful mental power burst out. Under the blessing of heaven's sun gazing at air, it locked onto Fang Jinwu and went straight to his mind. Fang Jinwu dodged several times in a row, but he failed to dodge it. He could only use his own power of qi and blood to resist the soul-destroying arrow. But at this time, the broken intestine voodoo was constantly biting in his body. The severe pain had seriously affected the condensation of his aura and even his mental concentration. Chu Xiu's expression was cold. Since he had made a move today, he was determined to kill Fang Jinwu. If Fang Jinwu didn't die today, there would be endless trouble in the future. After being hit by the soul-destroying arrow several times in a row, even Fang Jinwu was a little overwhelmed. Compared to the severe pain in his body, the pain in his mind made him crazy. However, what made him even more crazy was his current state. He was actually chased by a junior to such a sorry state. It even made him feel a tragic feeling of struggling on the line of life and death. How many years had it been since he felt this way? In fact, after he stepped into the true fire spirit refinement realm, Fang Jinwu rarely took risks with his body. Almost every time he made a move, he would definitely win because his enemies would usually be crushed. The true fire spirit refinement state martial artists from other major sects could afford to lose, but he couldn't. This time, Fang Jinwu also couldn't afford to lose. If he lost, not only would he lose his life, the reputation of his lineage would also be completely ruined. In a dilemma, Fang Jinwu suddenly turned his head. Light golden aura burst out from his body, affecting the surrounding heaven and earth to form a field, directly enveloping Chu Xiu. In an instant, Chu Xiu found that the air around him seemed to have stagnated. It was uncomfortable like glue. Almost all the power in this world was absorbed into Fang Jinwu's stomach. Chu Xiu sneered and said, "Absorb it. The more power you absorb, the better. Don't you know that the power you absorb can not only strengthen yourself, but also the goo worms in your body?" Fang Jinwu didn't answer Chu Xiu. Instead, he directly made a seal with his hands. In an instant, with Chu Xiu as the center, the surrounding heaven and earth instantly reversed. The surging aura condensed into a huge swastika Buddhist seal, imprisoning Chu Xiu within it. With a loud bang, the swastika Buddhist seal seemed to be ignited. It gave off a boundless scorching light and began to explode. Deep in the center of the swastika Buddhist seal, Chu Xiu's expression also changed slightly as he felt the power around him. In fact, this was the first time that Chu Xiu fought with an expert in the spiritual cultivation realm with true fire. The time with Divine Lord Luo didn't count, because Chu Xiu himself was in a daze and Divine Lord Luo was scared away by him. It was only now that Chu Xiu truly felt and understood the power of the spiritual cultivation realm with true fire. It was a powerful power that belonged to heaven and earth. Even though his opponent was just an old Fang Jinwu who had been infected with the broken intestine goo, which seriously affected his ability, the power was still shocking. In the endless Buddhist aura, Chu Xiu also made a Buddhist seal with his hands. In an instant, the shadow of Vairocana behind him resisted the power amidst the chanting of Buddha's voice. However, he was still forced to retreat step by step. Fighting Buddha with Buddha, in the boundless explosion of the aura, with Chu Xiu as the center, the ground within 1,000 feet under his feet was even ground to a depth of several feet, like a huge pit. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.